The sky above Manhattan tore open without warning. It began as a ripple, a distortion in the fabric of afternoon air that bent light and shadow into impossible angles. Then the rupture widened, a circular wound bleeding violet energy across the clouds. The breach expanded with deliberate violence, swallowing the blue expanse overhead until a massive portal hung suspended above the city like a malignant eye. From within that dimensional gateway, something emerged. The first shape to break through was enormous, geometric, brutal in its industrial design. A Q-ship, larger than any aircraft carrier, descended through the portal with the slow inevitability of a falling moon. Its hull was dark metal, scarred by countless campaigns across galaxies, its surface studded with weapon arrays that hummed with gathering energy. Behind it, more portals ignited across the skyline, dozens of them. The clouds became a canvas of tearing reality. Then came the Outriders. They poured from the breaches like a living flood. Thousands upon thousands of them, their four-limbed forms silhouetted against the violet light as they plummeted toward the streets below. Their claws scraped against steel and concrete as they landed, their eyeless faces turning in unison toward the nearest signs of life. They moved with terrible coordination, a swarm with singular purpose. The screaming started immediately. Civilians scattered through the streets of Manhattan, their panic spreading faster than the creatures themselves. Cars collided as drivers abandoned their vehicles mid-flight. Windows shattered as people dove for cover. The orderly rhythm of the city collapsed into chaos. Within seconds, the mundane afternoon transformed into a waking nightmare. But Earth 616 had faced invasions before. The response came swiftly. A repulsor blast carved through a cluster of Outriders, vaporizing them in a flash of brilliant blue. Iron Man descended from the sky, his armor gleaming red and gold, his targeting systems already identifying threats by the hundreds. Behind him, War Machine and Falcon swept into formation, their weapons hot and ready. Thunder cracked across the skyline. Lightning struck the Q-ship's hull, scarring its surface with branching white fire. Thor landed on a rooftop with enough force to crater the concrete Stormbreaker, gripped tight in his hands, his eyes crackling with divine fury. Rain began to fall, summoned by his presence, turning the afternoon air cold and electric. Captain America's voice cut through the chaos on every hero frequency. Clear, steady, unshakable. "Avengers defensive positions. Protect the civilians. Hold the line." The shield flew from his hand, ricocheting between Outriders with perfect precision before returning to his grasp. He stood at street level, already forming the front line, already immovable. Beside him, Hulk roared and charged into the swarm, each punch sending alien bodies flying like broken dolls. But this was not just an Avengers fight. Golden light erupted across 3 city blocks as sorcerers from Camartage materialized through circular portals. Dr. Strange hovered above the intersection of Broadway and 42nd Street, the cloak of levitation billowing around him as his hands traced intricate patterns through the air. Shields of eldritch energy manifested above the civilians below, deflecting debris and alien fire. Wong coordinated 24 sorcerers, their combined magic forming a lattice of protection across the most populated zones. From the east, Wakandan aircraft screamed through the sky, their vibranium hulls shimmering as they opened fire on the descending Q-ships. Energy weapons lanced through the air in brilliant streams of blue, targeting the portal generators. On the ground, Okoye led a squad of Dora Milaje, their spears humming with kinetic charge as they cut through Outriders with surgical precision. The X-Men arrived through their own means. Cyclops stood atop a water tower, his visor tracking targets, releasing measured optic blasts that carved clean lines through the enemy formations. Storm ascended into the sky beside Thor, her eyes white with power as she called down lightning of her own. Wolverine hit the street-level fight with characteristic fury, his claws extending as he tore into anything that came close. But the numbers kept growing. For every outrider killed, 3 more descended through the portals. The streets became a war zone littered with wreckage and bodies. Buildings burned, the air filled with smoke and the smell of ozone and alien biology. The heroes fought with everything they had, their powers creating a dazzling display of light and fury across the Manhattan skyline. Yet they were being pushed back. The Black Order made their entrance with calculated precision. Ebony Maw descended from a Q-ship, his hands already weaving telekinetic patterns that tore chunks of street and building free, hurling them at the defenders. Proxima Midnight moved like liquid shadow, her spear deflecting Iron Man's repulsor fire before she drove it through a Wakandan aircraft's wing. Corvus Glaive appeared behind the sorcerer's line, his glaive's edge cutting through magical shields like they were paper. Cull Obsidian landed in the middle of the Avengers formation, with enough force to crack the pavement for 30 feet in every direction. The battle's momentum shifted immediately. Iron Man found himself dodging massive concrete slabs, controlled by Ebony Maw's telekinesis, unable to get a clear shot. Thor traded blows with Cull Obsidian, each impact sending shockwaves through the surrounding blocks. Doctor Strange engaged Ebony Maw in a duel of manipulation and counter-manipulation, reality itself bending between them. The sky darkened as more portals opened. The Outriders' numbers became uncountable, a tide that threatened to drown the city entirely. The heroes' formations began to fracture under the pressure. Civilians still trapped in the combat zone screamed as buildings collapsed. The protective barriers flickered as sorcerers fell back, their energy depleting. Captain America's shield embedded itself in an Outrider's skull, and he yanked it free with practiced efficiency. Blood and something worse stained the vibranium surface. Around him, the line was collapsing. They were fighting with everything they had. It wasn't enough. The afternoon sun was barely visible now through the smoke and the alien ships. Manhattan burned. The greatest heroes of Earth 616 stood against an overwhelming force, refusing to yield even as the odds grew impossible. Somewhere above them, beyond the portals and the chaos, something else was happening. A different kind of rupture. Smaller, unstable, unnoticed in the carnage below. A crack in space that had nothing to do with Thanos or his invasion. Something was about to fall through. The anomaly appeared without precedent. High above the war zone, beyond the violet portals and the descending Q-ships, space itself began to fail. Not a tear like Thanos had created, but something fundamentally wrong. A distortion that made the surrounding air shimmer and warp, as if reality were rejecting something foreign, trying to force its way through. Doctor Strange sensed it first. His hands froze mid-gesture, the spell he'd been weaving against Ebony Maw, dissipating as his attention snapped skyward. His eyes widened behind the mask of concentration he'd maintained throughout the battle. Wong noticed his mentor's sudden stillness and followed his gaze upward. "Stephen." Strange didn't answer. He was already analyzing the phenomenon with every mystical sense at his disposal, scanning through dimensional frequencies, checking the barriers between worlds. What he found made no sense. The rupture wasn't magical. It wasn't cosmic energy. It wasn't any form of technology he recognized. The readings were impossible, contradictory, as if something that shouldn't exist was forcing itself into existence anyway. "We have an additional breach," Strange announced through the communication network, his voice tight with concern. "Unknown origin, unknown classification. It's not from Thanos." Iron Man's HUD immediately reoriented sensors sweeping the sky. Jarvis ran analysis after analysis, each one returning the same frustrating result: insufficient data. The energy signature didn't match anything in his databases, any known dimensional frequency, any recorded alien technology. It was as if the universe itself was glitching. "I'm not reading anything," Tony reported, frustration bleeding into his voice as he blasted another outrider. "No energy signature, no mass, no radiation. It's just empty space acting like it's not." The distortion expanded, slowly at first, then faster, growing from a pinpoint shimmer to a visible crack in the air. Space folded around it incorrectly, creating optical illusions that hurt to look at directly. The heroes closest to the phenomenon felt an inexplicable wrongness, a fundamental sense that whatever was happening violated rules they didn't even know existed. Then something fell through. A figure. Humanoid. Dropping from the impossible space with the casual inevitability of someone who'd simply missed a step. No grand entrance, no energy discharge, no dramatic arrival. Just a man falling from nowhere, plummeting toward the battlefield below, with arms and legs slightly askew as if he'd been caught mid-stumble. His name was Saitama, though no one on Earth 616 had any way of knowing that yet. His appearance was striking in its peculiarity. The man was completely bald, his head smooth and gleaming without a single hair anywhere on his scalp. Not the baldness of age or illness, but an absolute absence of hair that seemed almost deliberate, as if every follicle had simply decided to stop existing. His face was unremarkable ordinary, in every conventional sense, with brown eyes that held an expression of mild confusion as he fell. There was nothing inherently threatening about his features, nothing that suggested power or danger. He looked, if anything, like an average man who'd gotten lost on his way to somewhere mundane. But his outfit was impossible to ignore. He wore a bright yellow jumpsuit, the color so vivid it seemed to glow even against the smoke-darkened sky. The one-piece suit was form-fitting, but not tight practical in design, with a short zipper at the collar. Around his waist, a black belt with a simple round buckle added the only break in the yellow expanse. His gloves were red, extending 3/4 of the way up his forearms, the color bold and primary. His boots matched the gloves perfectly, rising nearly to his knees in the same brilliant red. Most distinctive of all was the white cape that billowed behind him as he fell. Pure white, somehow remaining pristine despite the dimensional transit, fastened to his shoulders with large round buttons. The fabric caught the air as he descended, creating a striking silhouette against the chaos below. The entire ensemble looked less like combat gear and more like a costume, something a child might draw when imagining what a superhero should wear. It was garish, impractical, and utterly out of place on a battlefield. Saitama's descent wasn't particularly fast. Gravity affected him normally, pulling him down at terminal velocity toward the chaos below. He seemed unbothered by the fall, his posture relaxed, almost bored. His arms hung loosely at his sides, his legs bent slightly, his expression never shifting from that mild confusion. As he dropped through the smoke layer, the full absurdity of his appearance became clear to anyone watching a completely bald man in a yellow jumpsuit with red accessories and a white cape falling toward an alien invasion, as if he'd simply taken a wrong turn at a crosswalk. He landed in the middle of the street. The impact should have killed him. A fall from that height onto concrete should have resulted in a crater and a corpse. Instead, his red boots touched down, with barely a sound knees bending slightly to absorb momentum that simply vanished upon contact. The ground didn't crack. Dust didn't even rise. He straightened up, brushed off his red gloves with an absent gesture, and looked around at the battle surrounding him. His completely bald head turned left, then right, taking in the burning buildings, the alien creatures, the costumed heroes fighting for their lives. His brown eyes swept across the scene with that same detached confusion, as if trying to figure out how he'd ended up in the middle of someone else's problem. An outrider noticed him immediately. The creature had been advancing on a group of trapped civilians, its eyeless face tracking their movement through some alien sense. But this new arrival, this strange figure in yellow, with the bald head and white cape, registered as closer prey. The outrider pivoted with predatory speed, its clawed limbs propelling it forward in a charging leap. Saitama turned his head slightly, noticed the incoming creature with the mild interest someone might give an annoying insect, and raised one red-gloved hand. He didn't throw a punch. His fist simply moved forward at normal speed, almost lazy in its execution, connecting with the outrider's torso. The creature exploded. Not figuratively. It literally detonated into constituent particles, its entire body reduced to a mist of organic matter that dissipated before it could even splatter against the pavement. The shock wave from the impact continued past where the outrider had been carving a perfectly straight line through the debris behind it, flattening wreckage and leaving a clean path through the chaos. Saitama lowered his hand, examined his red glove briefly to ensure it was still clean, and continued looking around with that same expression of mild confusion. His white cape settled back against his shoulders, unstained by the violence. Every sensor pointed at him, screamed contradictions. Iron Man's suit registered zero energy output from the strike. No kinetic buildup, no power discharge, no residual radiation. According to his instruments, Saitama had simply moved his arm at normal human speed, with normal human strength. Yet an outrider, a creature capable of withstanding small arms fire, had ceased to exist. Dr. Strange's mystical senses found nothing. No aura, no magical presence, no connection to any dimensional power source he recognized. Saitama existed as a void in the fabric of magic. A blank space where something should be, but wasn't. The bald man in the ridiculous costume registered as completely mundane to every form of supernatural detection. Thor's divine perception, honed over millennia, detected no godhood, no cosmic power, no connection to any force he knew. The figure registered as mortal, powerless, insignificant. Just a bald human in strange clothing. But the outrider was gone. Proxima Midnight, locked in combat with Black Panthers, saw the display. Her warrior instincts, refined through countless campaigns, recognized a threat, even when logic said there was none. She disengaged with a powerful leap, landing 30 feet away, her spear leveled at this new variable. Her eyes took in his appearance. The bald head, the yellow suit, the red gloves, and boots, the white cape. Everything about him screamed, civilian amateur, someone playing at heroism. Yet her instincts screamed danger. "Who are you?" Her voice carried authority, the tone of someone accustomed to interrogating captured enemies. Saitama turned to look at her. His bald head caught the light from nearby fires. His expression didn't change. If anything, he looked slightly annoyed at being addressed. Oh, sorry, name's Saitama." His voice was flat, utterly devoid of the drama the situation should warrant. "I think I took a wrong turn somewhere. This isn't my neighborhood." Captain America's tactical mind processed the scene rapidly. Unknown combatant, unknown capabilities. Had just eliminated an outrider with casual ease. Had fallen from an unexplained dimensional rupture. Name meant nothing, origin unknown. Appearance suggested either extreme confidence or complete ignorance. Could be an enemy reinforcement, could be another threat entirely. "Everyone new contact," Steve announced through the comms. "Unidentified hostile named Saitama. Treat as potentially dangerous until proven otherwise." Saitama sighed, a sound of someone dealing with a minor inconvenience, rather than a battlefield full of alien invaders and superheroes. He scratched the back of his bald head with one red-gloved hand, the gesture casual and utterly out of place. He looked around at the burning city, the portals in the sky, the ongoing carnage, his white cape shifting slightly in the smoke-filled air. "This looks pretty serious," he muttered mostly to himself. Maybe I should just find somewhere to wait this out. Another group of outriders, drawn by the concentration of targets, came rushing around the corner of a collapsed building. 6 of them moving with pack coordination claws, scraping against debris as they accelerated toward the cluster of heroes and this strange newcomer in yellow. Saitama noticed them approaching. His brown eyes tracked their movement with the same mild interest he'd shown everything else. One of the outriders, faster than the others, launched itself through the air directly at him, claws extended toward that bald head and ridiculous costume. He stepped aside. The movement was economical, unhurried. Just a simple sidestep, hands sliding into the pockets of his yellow jumpsuit cape, swaying gently. The outrider sailed past him, its claws missing by inches, and crashed into the pavement hard enough to crack concrete. But the creature's momentum didn't just carry it forward. It kept going, tumbling end over end down the street with unnatural force, as if it had hit an invisible wall moving at highway speed. It bounced 3 times before finally sliding to a stop, 70 feet away, motionless. Saitama hadn't touched it. Iron Man's sensors tried to make sense of what they'd just witnessed. Air displacement. Localized gravity manipulation, force field generated by that absurd costume. The readings gave him nothing useful. Whatever had happened, it had happened through mechanisms his technology couldn't detect. The bald man in yellow had simply stepped aside, and an alien war beast had died. Spider-Man, perched on a nearby building and watching through his mask's enhanced lenses, felt his spider sense screaming. Not in the usual way, not warning him of specific danger. It was buzzing constantly, directionlessly, as if unable to decide whether this person was a threat or not. The sensation was deeply unsettling. His eyes kept being drawn to that perfectly bald head, that ridiculous costume, trying to reconcile what he was seeing with what his senses were telling him. Thor landed nearby, Stormbreaker at the ready. His warrior's assessment of the stranger returned troubling conclusions. Saitama showed no fear, no battle readiness, no indication he understood the severity of the situation around him. His bald head gleamed in the firelight, his yellow suit unmarked by combat, his white cape pristine. Yet something about his presence felt heavy, like standing near a collapsed star that appeared deceptively small. "State your purpose here, Saitama," Thor commanded, his voice carrying the authority of Asgard. Saitama looked at Thor, then at Stormbreaker, then back at Thor's face. His expression remained unchanged, his bald head tilting slightly as he considered the question. "I already told you." "Wrong turn?" "Not sure how I got here, actually." He paused, considering. "Say, is there a supermarket nearby? I had a coupon that expires today." The question was so absurdly out of place that several heroes faltered mid-combat, unsure they'd heard correctly. The bald man in the yellow costume was asking about grocery shopping in the middle of an alien invasion. Then everything went wrong at once. The remaining 5 outriders, interpreting Saitama's presence as hostile, based on his proximity to the other heroes, attacked simultaneously from multiple angles. Proxima Midnight, seeing an opportunity, hurled her spear with enough force to punch through a tank, aiming directly at the center of that yellow jumpsuit. Ebony Maw, hovering above, sent a section of destroyed taxicab, hurtling toward that bald head at supersonic speed. Saitama blinked and did nothing. The attacks converged on his position with lethal precision and overwhelming force. Every hero in visual range braced themselves for the inevitable brutal outcome. That bald man in the ridiculous costume was about to be torn apart. But the spear never arrived. Neither did the outriders or the telekinetically thrown debris. Everything stopped. Proxima Midnight's spear hung motionless in the air, 3 inches from Saitama's chest. The weapon trembled, vibrating at a frequency that suggested enormous force still trying to drive it forward. Yet it remained frozen, as if embedded in invisible steel. The 5 Outriders had similarly stopped mid-leap, their bodies suspended at various points around him, claws extended but unable to reach their target. The taxicab section, controlled by Ebony Maw, had simply halted, hanging above the street like a prop in a paused film. Saitama looked down at the spear pointed at his sternum. His expression shifted slightly, moving from mild confusion to mild annoyance. "That's rude," he said. Then he flicked the spear with his index finger. The sound was barely audible, just a soft, metallic ping. But the weapon shot backward faster than the eye could track, spinning end over end through the air. It passed within inches of Proxima Midnight's head, close enough that she felt the wind of its passage, before embedding itself 3 feet deep into the side of a building half a block away. The entire structure shuddered from the impact. The Outriders dropped to the ground simultaneously, their bodies suddenly freed from whatever had held them suspended. They scrambled backward, their alien instincts recognizing a predator, even if their limited intelligence couldn't comprehend what they faced. Ebony Maw's telekinetic grip on the debris vanished as if severed. The taxi section fell to the pavement with a crash of twisted metal. Iron Man's targeting systems locked onto Saitama, automatically repulsor arrays charging. Every tactical protocol screamed the same conclusion: eliminate the threat before it could act further. Tony's finger hovered over the firing control, but something made him hesitate. Saitama hadn't actually attacked anyone, had only defended himself. The calculus of engagement suddenly became murky. Captain America made the decision for all of them. Subdue him. Non-lethal if possible. He's hostile. The shield flew from Steve's hand with practiced precision. Its arc calculated to strike Saitama's shoulder to disable without killing. Simultaneously, Iron Man fired repulsor blasts aimed at his legs, meant to knock him down rather than through. Thor hurled Stormbreaker not at Saitama himself, but at the ground before his feet, intending to create a shockwave that would destabilize his footing. The attacks converged with the coordination born of years fighting together. Saitama watched them come. He didn't move from his position, didn't raise his hands to defend, didn't even shift his weight. His eyes tracked the incoming projectiles with the detached interest of someone watching a mildly entertaining television program. Captain America's shield struck his shoulder and stopped. The vibranium made contact and simply arrested all momentum, the kinetic energy bleeding away into nothing. The shield hung there for half a heartbeat before falling straight down, clattering against the pavement. The repulsor blasts hit his legs and dispersed. The energy washed over him like water over stone, the photons scattering in random directions, the heat vanishing, the kinetic force simply ceasing to exist upon contact. His cape didn't even flutter. Stormbreaker struck the ground 3 feet in front of him. The impact should have created a crater, sent shockwaves rippling through the earth, launched debris in every direction. Instead, the weapon embedded itself in the concrete with barely a crack. Its momentum somehow dampened its divine power, rendered impotent. Thor's eyes widened in disbelief as he felt the connection to his weapon dim, as if Stormbreaker itself was confused by what had just happened. Saitama sighed again, louder this time. The sound carried clearly through the chaos of the battlefield, conveying a bone-deep weariness that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. "I'm not here to fight anyone," he said, his flat tone suggesting he was repeating something he'd had to say far too many times before. "I just want to find a supermarket and go home." Spider-Man swung down from his perch, landing on a nearby car hood. His spider sense was still screaming, but watching Saitama's body language, his complete lack of aggressive posture created a cognitive dissonance that made Peter's head hurt. Mr. Saitama, I don't think you understand what's happening here. This is an alien invasion. Those things are trying to kill everyone. And you just... Peter gestured vaguely at where the Outrider had exploded. You kind of murdered one of them. So we're a little concerned about whose side you're on. Saitama looked at Spider-Man, then at the spot where the Outrider had been, as if trying to remember what Peter was referring to. Oh, that. It jumped at me. Reflex. Reflex. Tony repeated, his voice flat with disbelief. You disintegrated a combat alien with a reflex. Is that weird? Before anyone could answer, Hulk decided the conversation had lasted long enough. With a roar that shook windows 3 blocks away, he charged across the street. Each footfall cracking pavement, his massive green form building momentum like a runaway freight train. Bruce Banner's tactical mind had receded entirely, leaving only the Hulk's simple calculus threat to friend's threat must be stopped. The punch Hulk threw would have reduced a building to rubble. His massive fist, moving with force, measured in hundreds of tons, accelerated toward Saitama's head with the inevitability of a meteor strike. Saitama turned to watch it come. He didn't flinch, didn't brace, didn't react beyond mild curiosity. Hulk's fist connected. The sound of impact was wrong. Not the bone-crushing thunder of flesh hitting flesh, but a soft thump like a pillow hitting a wall. Hulk's forward momentum stopped instantly, his entire body arrested in mid-charge. His arm remained extended, fist pressed against the side of Saitama's head, but producing zero discernible effect. Saitama hadn't moved. His neck hadn't compressed. His body hadn't shifted even fractionally from the force. He stood exactly as he had been, the only difference being that a massive green fist was now resting against his skull. Hulk processed this for approximately 2 seconds before roaring again and throwing another punch with his left hand. Then his right again. Then both hands in rapid succession, each blow carrying enough force to shatter mountains, each impact producing that same soft, ineffectual sound. Saitama endured this with the patience of someone waiting for a toddler to finish a tantrum. After the 7th or 8th punch, he spoke. Are you done? Hulk paused, arm cocked back for another strike, confusion flickering across his rage-twisted features. That tickles a little bit, Saitama added, his tone suggesting that even calling it a tickle was generous. Hulk's eyes widened, then narrowed. Then he grabbed Saitama with both hands, lifted him off the ground with surprising gentleness, considering his anger, and hurled him skyward with every ounce of strength in his gamma-enhanced body. The throw would have sent an object into low orbit. Saitama traveled upward, approximately 30 feet, his arms and legs flailing slightly, cape billowing behind him. His expression had shifted again now, showing genuine irritation rather than mere annoyance. At the apex of his arc, he seemed to make a decision. He stopped moving upward and simply fell back down, landing on the same spot he'd been standing before, feet touching concrete, with that same whisper-soft contact. Okay, he said, brushing off his gloves again. I get it. You think I'm with them. He pointed at a nearby group of Outriders. I'm not. I don't even know what those things are. I'm just lost and trying to figure out what's going on. Dr. Strange had been analyzing the situation with increasingly desperate attention. Every spell of revealing he attempted slid off Saitama like water off glass. Every attempt to peer into possible futures stuttered and failed when they tried to account for this man's presence. He was a variable that shouldn't exist, a walking paradox that broke every method of prediction and analysis. But Strange was nothing if not observant, and he'd noticed something crucial in the last several minutes. "He hasn't counterattacked," Strange said quietly through the comm network. "Not once. Hulk has been hitting him for 30 seconds, and he hasn't thrown a single punch in return." Wong, standing nearby and maintaining a protective barrier around civilians, voiced what Strange was thinking. "If he wanted us dead, we would be." That assessment sent a chill through every hero on the channel. Because it was demonstrably true. Saitama had killed an outrider with what appeared to be a casual tap, had stopped Proxima Midnight's spear with nothing but proximity, had endured attacks from multiple Avengers without taking damage or retaliating. The restraint required to simply stand there and absorb punishment was in its own way more terrifying than aggression would have been. Iron Man's tactical AI was already running probability matrices. The results were unanimous and disturbing. If hostile intent existed, engagement would result in total loss. "Recommend immediate de-escalation." Tony cleared his throat. "Jarvis is suggesting we try talking before we try more hitting." Talking. Thor retrieved Stormbreaker from where it remained embedded in the street, the weapon coming reluctantly, as if still uncertain about what it had encountered. "This being has withstood attacks that would fell gods. Words seem insufficient." "Words are all we have left," Strange interjected, "because force clearly isn't working." Captain America, his shield retrieved and mounted back on his arm, approached cautiously. His entire body screamed tactical disadvantage, every instinct warned against closing distance with an unknown hostile. But leadership meant making the hard calls. He stopped 10 feet away, far enough to react if needed, close enough to demonstrate he wasn't attacking. "You said your name is Saitama." Steve began, his voice steady. "I'm Captain America. We're the Avengers. We protect Earth. Those creatures invading the city are called Outriders. They're being led by someone named Thanos. He wants to kill half of all life in the universe." He paused, measuring his next words carefully. "We saw you fall from a rupture in space. We saw you destroy one of the enemy. We saw you resist our attacks without fighting back. I need to know, are you here to help or hurt?" Saitama looked at Steve for a long moment, his expression unreadable. When he spoke, his voice carried no deception, no hidden agenda, just flat honesty. "I'm here by accident. I don't want to help or hurt. I just want to buy groceries and go home." He looked around at the burning city, the alien invaders, the assembled heroes. "But I guess the supermarket is closed." Another wave of Outriders came rushing around the corner, drawn by the concentration of targets. 30 or 40 of them, their claws scraping against debris, their eyeless faces tracking movement. They saw the cluster of heroes and Saitama as prey, and they attacked without hesitation. Saitama turned to look at them. His eyes narrowed slightly, not with concern, but with irritation. When he spoke, it was almost to himself. "These things are getting annoying." He took a step forward. Just one step. His right foot lifted, moved forward, planted itself back on the ground. The shock wave from that single step rippled outward like a visible wall of compressed air. It struck the charging Outriders, simultaneously catching all 40 mid-stride. Their bodies didn't explode like the first one had. Instead, they simply stopped moving and collapsed, their alien biology shutting down instantly from trauma the sensors couldn't measure. The wave continued past them, flattening debris, clearing dust from the air, creating a perfect circle of calm in the middle of the war zone. Every hero present felt the shock wave pass through them. It didn't hurt, didn't damage, but it resonated in their bones, in their cells. A sensation that suggested they'd just been touched by something fundamental. something that existed on a level beneath matter itself. Saitama looked back at the heroes, his expression returning to its default state of mild disinterest. See? They attacked me. I defended myself. I'm not the enemy here. Spider-Man was the first to lower his guard completely. Maybe it was his youth, his relative inexperience compared to the others. Or maybe it was his spider sense, which had finally stopped screaming and settled into a strange, neutral buzz. Whatever the reason, Peter pulled off his mask and looked at Saitama with something approaching understanding. Okay. I believe you. He glanced at the others. I mean, if he wanted to hurt us, we'd know it by now, right? He's had like 6 chances to punch someone's head off, and he hasn't taken any of them. Slowly, reluctantly, the other heroes began to lower their weapons. Tony's repulsors powered down. Thor rested Stormbreaker against his shoulder rather than holding it at the ready. Hulk, after one more considering look at Saitama, took a deep breath and felt the green recede Bruce Banner's smaller form, replacing the rage-fueled giant. Captain America approached closer, extending a hand. I apologize for the aggressive response. These are difficult circumstances. Saitama looked at the offered hand, then shook it with the enthusiasm of someone fulfilling a minor social obligation. His grip was utterly normal. No crushing pressure, no hidden threat. Just a handshake. It's fine. Happens sometimes. Happens sometimes. Tony's faceplate retracted, revealing an expression caught between incredulity and fascination. People trying to blow you up happens sometimes. More than you'd think. Before anyone could pursue that deeply concerning statement, the sky above them erupted with violet light. Another wave of portals tore open, these ones larger than before, disgorging Q-ships by the dozen. Outriders began raining down in such numbers that they darkened the sun. The brief moment of calm evaporated instantly as the invasion entered a new phase of intensity. Saitama looked up at the descending army with an expression that could only be described as profound boredom. This is going to take a while, isn't it? Dr. Strange, hovering nearby and already sketching defensive spells, glanced at Saitama with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. Can you fight? Saitama shrugged a gesture of cosmic indifference. I guess. Then he vanished. Not teleportation, not super speed. He simply was no longer where he had been standing, one moment present, the next absent, as if edited out of reality between frames. 3 blocks away, an entire Q-ship buckled in midair as something struck it from below. The impact point glowed white-hot for an instant before the vessel's structural integrity failed completely, the massive craft folding in on itself like crumpled paper. It began falling from the sky, thousands of tons of alien technology rendered into debris. Saitama reappeared standing in the street exactly where he'd been before, his posture unchanged. He looked at his fist, which showed no damage whatsoever, then at the heroes. Like that Tony Stark, who prided himself on his ability to adapt to any situation, found his vocabulary failing him entirely. What he managed finally, in the actual hell. Saitama didn't answer. He was already looking around at the descending outriders, at the burning city, at the portals still opening in the sky. His expression suggested he was doing mental math he didn't particularly enjoy. Then, with the same profound reluctance someone might show when facing an enormous pile of dishes, he began to walk toward the thickest concentration of enemies. The battle for Manhattan was about to change in ways no one, hero or villain, could have anticipated. The portals multiplied across the sky like a disease spreading through reality itself. What had been dozens became hundreds, each new tear in space vomiting forth more outriders, more Q-ships, more weapons of conquest. The violet light grew so intense, it painted Manhattan in apocalyptic hues, transforming what remained of the afternoon into something that belonged to nightmare. The air itself vibrated with dimensional stress reality, protesting the sustained violation of its fundamental laws. Tony's HUD displayed numbers that climbed past the threshold of manageable threat assessment. 15,000 hostiles, 20,000, 30. The count accelerated faster than Jarvis could track. His AI had stopped calculating odds of survival and moved directly to determining which evacuation routes might save the most civilians before the inevitable collapse. "We can't hold this," Tony said quietly through the comm network. Not defeatist, just tactical reality delivered with the flat honesty of someone who'd run the numbers and didn't like what they said. Steve's voice came back steady, but even Captain America couldn't hide the edge beneath the words. "We hold anyway." Saitama stood in the middle of the street, hands in his pockets, watching the sky fill with alien ships. His head tilted slightly as he observed the portals multiply, his expression suggesting someone doing mental arithmetic they found tedious. "That's a lot of them," he said to no one in particular. The comment was so mundane, so completely divorced from the apocalyptic scenario unfolding above them, that several heroes actually glanced his way, despite the chaos. Dr. Strange descended to street level, the cloak of levitation settling around his shoulders. His eyes never left Saitama. Every mystical sense Strange possessed screamed contradiction when focused on this man. He existed as a void, a blank space in the fundamental fabric of reality, where something should be, but wasn't. No past, no future, no connection to the infinite threads that bound all living things to causality and fate. Strange had seen gods, had bargained with cosmic entities, had stared into the face of Dormammu and won through nothing but stubborn repetition and time manipulation. But this was different. This was worse. Because at least gods followed rules. At least demons operated within comprehensible frameworks of power and limitation, even if those frameworks were vast beyond human understanding. Saitama didn't follow anything. "You're not from this universe," Strange said. Not a question. A statement of something he'd already confirmed through every method available to him. Saitama glanced at him. "Yeah, wrong turn." "That's not possible. The barriers between realities don't just open accidentally. The energy required the precision needed to breach dimensional walls." Strange trailed off, reconsidering everything he thought he knew about cosmic architecture. "Unless you forced your way through." "I didn't do anything. I was just walking and then I was falling." Saitama shrugged. "Happens sometimes." "It happens sometimes." Strange repeated slowly, his tone carefully neutral while his mind raced through the implications. He looked at Wong, who'd joined them. His old friend's expression mirrored his own mix of fascination and growing existential dread. They were both thinking the same thing. If reality itself couldn't contain this person, what could? The philosophical implications were staggering. Every hero, every villain, every cosmic entity operated within understood parameters. Power had sources, mutation technology, divine heritage, cosmic radiation. Abilities had limits, stamina energy reserves, the fundamental laws of thermodynamics. Even beings who claimed omnipotence followed their own internal logic, their own rules of engagement with the universe. But Saitama seemed to simply exist outside the entire system, a rounding error in causality. Causality that somehow became self-aware and developed an interest in grocery shopping. An outrider landed 30 feet away, its claws scraping against concrete as it oriented on the cluster of heroes. It saw prey and charged without hesitation or tactical consideration. Saitama took one step toward it, The shock wave from that single footfall rippled outward in a perfect circle, visible as compressed air and displaced dust. The outrider simply ceased forward motion, its body crumpling mid-charge before falling motionless to the pavement. The wave continued past it, washing over 24 more outriders behind it. They collapsed in unison, their biological systems shutting down from trauma that registered on exactly 0 sensors. No energy discharge, no kinetic transfer visible to any instrument. Just a step and death. Bruce Banner, still in human form after the green had receded, watched with the clinical detachment of a scientist observing something that violated every known law of physics. His mind was already trying to formulate theories, running through possibilities, rejecting each one as they failed to account for what his eyes had just witnessed. "Conservation of energy doesn't apply to him," Bruce said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. "Whatever he does, it doesn't draw from any detectable source. It just happens. As if the universe simply accepts his actions as fait accompli and retroactively adjusts reality to accommodate them." "That shouldn't be possible," Tony said, his voice carrying the faint strain of someone whose entire worldview was being systematically dismantled. "Neither should he." Thor gripped Stormbreaker tighter, divine senses struggling with what they perceived. In Asgard, power had weight. It had presence. It could be measured by those trained to see it, felt in the bones of those who carried divine blood. The Odin force sang in his veins, allowing him to recognize other sources of cosmic might, to gauge threats and allies by the resonance of their power. But Saitama registered as nothing, as mortal, as insignificant by every metric Thor's senses understood. Yet he'd just killed 24 outriders by walking. "What manner of being are you?" Thor asked, genuine confusion breaking through his usual confidence. "Are you god-demon? Something beyond naming that has descended from higher realms?" Saitama looked at him with those same mild eyes that held no secrets, no hidden depths, just simple awareness and persistent confusion at his situation. "I'm a hero for fun." The answer was so mundane, so completely at odds with everything they'd witnessed, that several heroes actually laughed. The sound was brief, strangled by the realization that he might be completely serious. That this being who casually violated physics might genuinely consider himself nothing more than a hobbyist. Another wave of outriders descended these ones, numbering in the hundreds. They'd learned nothing from watching their brethren die. Their biology didn't allow for tactical adaptation at that level. They saw prey and attacked with the single-minded purpose of hunting animals, their four-limbed forms, dropping from portals like rain. Saitama sighed, the sound carrying clearly, despite the chaos. "This is getting annoying," he said. Then he disappeared. Not teleportation. No portal, no flash of light, no distortion of space to mark his passage. He simply was no longer standing where he'd been. Reality adjusted, accepting his absence the same way it had accepted his presence, with complete indifference to the violation of its own rules. He reappeared in the middle of the descending swarm, hundreds of feet above street level, suspended in air with no visible means of support. His fist had already completed its arc by the time human perception caught up to his movement. The shock wave from that punch expanded in a perfect sphere, catching every outrider within a 3-block radius simultaneously. The pressure wave obliterated their bodies at the molecular level, reducing alien biology to constituent atoms in the span of a microsecond. The air itself compressed into visibility, a translucent dome that expanded outward at supersonic speed before dissipating. Buildings cracked. Windows 3 miles away shattered in sequence, the sound rolling across the city like thunder. Car alarms across half of Manhattan triggered in unison, adding their voices to the chaos. The shock wave reached the East River and created waves that would puzzle meteorologists for weeks. Saitama fell back toward the street landing with that same whisper-soft contact that produced no crater, no crack, no acknowledgement that something had just descended from terminal velocity. He looked at his glove, checking for stains, then continued walking toward the thickest concentration of enemies with the resigned air of someone facing an unpleasant chore. "Okay," Peter said, his voice slightly higher than normal. "Okay, so that just happened. That was several hundred of them, at once, in the air. Several hundred hostiles eliminated," Jarvis reported in Tony's ear, the AI's tone as close to bewildered as its programming allowed. "Energy expenditure 0 detectable. Methodology impossible to determine. Threat assessment has been upgraded to do not engage under any circumstances. Recommend immediate alliance if possible." "Little late for that advice," Tony muttered, though his eyes never left Saitama's retreating form. Ebony Maw watched from his position atop a crumbling building, telekinetic senses reeling from what he'd just witnessed. He'd served Thanos for centuries, had seen the Mad Titan wield the Power Stone to reduce planets to ash with a gesture, had watched as cosmic-level beings fell before the might of the Infinity Gauntlet's assembled power. But this was different. This was wrong in a way that transcended tactical disadvantage or superior force. The being in yellow hadn't drawn on any external power source, hadn't channeled cosmic energy or tapped into dimensional reservoirs. He'd simply moved, and reality had accommodated him with the casual indifference of a universe that had given up arguing with something it couldn't define. Ebony Maw prided himself on his intellect, on his ability to analyze and understand the fundamental nature of threats. But his mind skittered away from Saitama like water off hot oil, unable to find purchase, unable to construct a framework that could contain what he was observing. "Interesting," Ebony Maw said, his voice carrying across the battlefield through telekinetic amplification. "You are an anomaly. A statistical impossibility given form and consciousness. I wonder if you'll prove as resilient when I peel your mind apart layer by layer and unravel whatever passes for your thoughts." His hands moved in complex patterns, telekinetic force gathering in waves that could crush steel like tinfoil, that could reduce human brains to jelly, that could manipulate matter itself at the quantum level. He'd torn apart the minds of gods with these techniques, had broken cosmic entities through sheer focused will. The invisible waves struck Saitama from 6 different angles, simultaneously targeting his neural tissue, his synaptic connections, the fundamental electrochemical processes that allowed consciousness to exist. Nothing happened. Ebony Maw pushed harder, pouring more power into the attack, feeling his mental strength strain against something that shouldn't exist. It was like trying to move a mountain with thoughts alone. No. Worse. Mountains at least acknowledged the attempt. This was like trying to affect something that existed in a completely different framework of reality, something his powers simply had no interface with. Saitama looked up at him, locating the source of the pressure he couldn't feel. "You're the one throwing cars earlier, right?" Then, he was standing next to Ebony Maw, having crossed 100 vertical feet and 30 horizontal in what appeared to be a single step. His hand reached out, not fast, not slow, just moving at normal human speed toward Ebony Maw's forehead. Ebony Maw threw up every defense he had. Telekinetic barriers layered a dozen deep, each one capable of stopping anti-tank rounds. Force fields that could withstand nuclear detonations. Reality warps that should have deflected any physical attack into alternate dimensions. He drew on every technique he'd mastered over centuries, every trick and skill that had made him one of Thanos' most valued children. Saitama's hand passed through them all as if they were missed, as if they simply didn't exist in any way that mattered to him. His palm touched Ebony Maw's forehead gently, almost kindly, the contact lighter than a handshake. Please stop throwing things. Someone could get hurt. Then he pushed lightly, barely more force than needed to close a door. Ebony Maw shot backward like a missile, his body carving a trench through 3 buildings before finally coming to rest half a mile away. Buried under rubble, unconscious, and bleeding from injuries, his telekinesis couldn't heal fast enough. Proxima Midnight saw her teammate fall and roared with pure fury. She was a warrior, had been a warrior for longer than this planet had recorded history. She'd fought gods and won, had spilled the blood of the cosmos's greatest champions across 1,000 worlds, had stood beside Thanos himself in battles that ended civilizations. She charged Saitama with everything she had, her spear leading her body, a weapon honed by centuries of combat. Every muscle moved with perfect efficiency, every step calculated for maximum speed and force transfer. Her strike was aimed with lethal precision at his center mass. The blow timed to pierce through whatever defense he might raise. Saitama caught the spear mid-thrust. His hand closed around the shaft with the casual ease of someone catching a tossed ball, stopping forward momentum instantly and absolutely. Proxima felt the shock run up her arms, felt tendons strain as her body's kinetic energy had nowhere to go. She pulled back, trying to wrench her weapon-free muscles that could bench press tanks flexing with full force. The spear didn't move even fractionally. She looked up at Saitama's face. His expression hadn't changed. Still mild confusion, still that faint annoyance at being interrupted from whatever mundane task he'd been planning. His eyes met hers, and for the first time in centuries of warfare, Proxima Midnight felt something she'd forgotten existed in her emotional repertoire: doubt. "This is yours, right?" Saitama said, holding up the spear as if asking about a misplaced umbrella. "You should be more careful where you point it." He released the weapon and turned away, dismissing her completely, as if a warrior who'd conquered worlds was beneath his notice. The casual disregard ignited something primal in Proxima's soul. She activated the spear's energy field, the weapon humming with lethal power drawn from technology Thanos had plundered from fallen empires, and struck at his unprotected back with enough force to punch through Asgardian steel. The spear shattered. Not bent, not deflected. It struck Saitama's back and simply disintegrated the entire weapon, reduced to fragments from the impact against something harder than any material physics understood. The shockwave from the collision sent Proxima tumbling backward, her hands burned from the backlash, her mind struggling to process what had just occurred. Saitama looked over his shoulder at the broken weapon, then at Proxima, his expression shifting to something that might have been disappointment. "See. Not careful." Corvus glaive materialized from the shadows, his unique weapon's edge aimed at Saitama's neck. The glaive was singular, and all the universe could cut through anything, could pierce any defense, could kill, even the unkillable. Its edge existed partially in another dimension, allowing it to bypass conventional durability entirely, to strike at the fundamental essence of matter and life itself. The blade struck Saitama's neck and stopped. Not deflected, not blocked. Simply stopped, as if it had hit something fundamentally unyielding that existed beyond the glaive's ability to affect. The dimensional edge that should have severed his head from his body pressed against his skin and produced zero effect. Corvus stared at his weapon in disbelief. This was impossible. The glaive worked by cutting through reality itself, not just matter. It should function on anything that existed within conventional space-time. But Saitama apparently didn't exist in a way that the glaive recognized as valid. "That tickles," Saitama said. He reached up and flicked the blade with one finger. The glaive shattered like glass, Corvus's most powerful weapon and source of immortality reduced to useless fragments. The Black Order member stumbled backward, watching centuries of power destroyed with the same casual ease someone might break a toothpick. Cull Obsidian, seeing his siblings fall, bellowed with rage and charged. His massive frame, easily 8 feet of engineered muscle and dense bone, accelerated with surprising speed for something so large. His chain hammer swung in a wide arc, the spiked head capable of crushing city blocks, each link in the chain strong enough to tether starships. Saitama didn't dodge, didn't block, didn't even raise his arms. He simply stood still as the hammer descended toward his head in an arc that carried enough kinetic energy to level a small building. The weapon hit. The sound was wrong. Metal striking something solid should ring, should clang, should produce acoustic feedback that matched the transfer of kinetic energy. Instead, there was a dull thump, followed by the sound of stressed metal failing like a soda can being crushed. The hammer's head crumpled on impact, its spiked surface flattening against Saitama's skull, as if it were made of aluminum foil. The chain snapped from the sudden loss of momentum, the individual links shattering from stress they weren't designed to handle. Cull Obsidian staggered his primary weapon, destroyed his mind, unable to process the physics-defying durability he'd just encountered. Saitama looked up at him, his neck craning to make eye contact with someone considerably taller. "You're pretty tall?" He observed, his tone suggesting this was vaguely interesting, but not particularly relevant. Then his fist moved a simple jab, barely any wind-up at all, the kind of punch someone might throw at a heavy bag during a casual workout. It connected with Cull Obsidian's solar plexus. The Black Order's strongest member folded around the punch like paper, his engineered biology offering zero resistance to whatever force had just transferred through his body. He shot backward, accelerating so rapidly he became a blur, punching through 17 buildings in a perfectly straight line, before finally coming to rest 4 miles away, embedded in the foundation of a skyscraper. The entire engagement had taken less than 30 seconds. The Black Order, Thanos' most elite warriors, beings who'd conquered worlds and slaughtered armies, had been dismantled with the same casual efficiency someone might use to swat mosquitoes. Complete silence fell across the battlefield. Every hero, every surviving outrider, every soldier on both sides had stopped fighting to watch the impossible display. The outriders, operating on instinct and limited intelligence, couldn't process what they'd witnessed. Their programming said attack. Their programming said swarm and overwhelm. But some deeper biological imperative, the kind that kept prey animals from walking into predator dens, was screaming warnings they had no way to understand or articulate. Saitama stood in the center of the streets, surrounded by broken weapons and demolished enemies, looking around at the thousands of remaining outriders with that same mild expression of someone facing a chore they'd rather avoid. "Anyone else?" he asked the assembled aliens, his tone conversational. The outriders attacked. All of them. Every single creature in visual range charged simultaneously, a living wave of claws and teeth and mindless aggression. Thousands of them darkening the streets, their combined weight enough to collapse buildings, their numbers sufficient to overwhelm through sheer mass alone. Saitama took a breath. Then he moved. What happened next would be debated by every surviving hero for years afterward. Not super speed, though speed was involved. Not teleportation, though he seemed to be in multiple places simultaneously. Something else entirely. Something that looked almost normal to the human eye, but produced results that shattered every known law governing motion, momentum, and energy transfer. He walked through the wave of outriders, his pace casual, almost leisurely, his fists striking out with the same energy someone might use to brush aside hanging beads in a doorway. But every punch killed hundreds, the shockwaves from his impacts propagating through the packed mass of alien bodies, each pressure wave multiplying force geometrically as it traveled through living tissue. Outriders, 500 feet away from impact points, simply died, their internal organs liquefied by pressure gradients that shouldn't exist. Their bodies crumpling to the ground like puppets with cut strings. The streets became carpeted with corpses, thousands of them, all eliminated with such casual efficiency it seemed almost boring to the one doing it. He walked 3 blocks in approximately 15 seconds. By the time he stopped, nothing in that entire section of Manhattan was moving except for the heroes watching in stunned silence. Tony's HUD tried to calculate what he'd just witnessed. Power output needed to generate those shockwaves, insufficient data. Speed required to cross that distance while striking that many targets, physics error. Durability needed to withstand the counterforce from those impacts, not applicable, no counterforce detected. Jarvis gave up calculating and just filed the entire event under anomalous phenomena, with a note to never ever attempt to engage this entity under any circumstances whatsoever. Saitama walked back to where the heroes were standing, stepping over alien corpses with the disinterest of someone navigating a messy room they hadn't created and didn't feel responsible for cleaning. "Is that all of them?" he asked, his tone suggesting mild hope that the answer might be yes. "Or are more coming?" Bruce Banner spoke carefully, his scientist mind desperately trying to find a framework that could accommodate what he'd just witnessed. "According to our scans, there are still Q ships in orbit. Potentially millions more Outriders waiting to deploy. This was just the first wave." Saitama looked up at the sky, at the portal's still bleeding violet light, at the ships hovering beyond visual range in the upper atmosphere. "Millions," he repeated flatly. "That'll take a while." Then he crouched slightly, knees bending, preparing to jump in a manner that suggested he'd done this many times before. "Wait," Strange said urgently, his hands already moving to cast protective spells. "If you leave atmosphere without protection, the vacuum will..." Saitama leapt. The pavement beneath his feet cratered instantly, a shockwave expanding outward that shattered windows for half a mile. His body accelerated upward at impossible speed, punching through the sound barrier so fast the sonic boom arrived a full second after he'd already left visual range. The displaced air created a momentary vacuum that pulled debris upward in his wake before gravity reasserted control. The heroes watched, too stunned to speak, as Saitama's form shot into the upper atmosphere, passing through clouds like they were mist, continuing to accelerate past where human eyes could track even with enhancement. "Did he just..." Peter started, his voice failing him. "Jump into space." Tony finished his tone flat with disbelief. "Yes." He jumped into space, without a suit, without oxygen, without any form of protection from hard vacuum or radiation or temperature extremes. He just jumped. They tracked him through various enhanced vision systems. Watched as Saitama reached the first Q ship and, still rising, punched through its hull like it was cardboard. The massive vessel began to break apart immediately, pieces falling away as structural integrity collapsed from catastrophic damage to load-bearing sections. Saitama continued upward, reaching the next ship, then the next, moving through Thanos' invasion fleet with the same casual efficiency he'd shown against the Outriders. Each ship he touched began to die, not exploding that would have required energy release, but simply falling apart as if the mere fact of his passage invalidated their structural cohesion. Within 30 seconds, 17 Q ships had been reduced to orbital debris. "He's not slowing down," Wong observed, tracking Saitama's trajectory through mystical sight that could perceive things beyond conventional vision. "He's past the Karman line. He's in hard vacuum and he's still accelerating." "Can he breathe in space?" Peter asked, his voice small. He shouldn't be able to breathe in space. Bruce set his scientist's mind rebelling against what his eyes were telling him. No one can breathe in space. That's literally what makes it space. They watched as Saitama, now just a distant speck against the black void, systematically dismantled the rest of Thanos' invasion fleet. One ship after another buckled under strikes that registered as zero energy output, but produced total structural failure. The entire armada, the force that had conquered countless worlds, reduced to orbital debris by a single man who decided their presence was annoying. 3 minutes later, Saitama reappeared, falling back through atmosphere, his body trailing flames from re-entry heat that seemed to affect him not at all. He landed back in the street with that same soft impact that defied everything they knew about kinetic energy and terminal velocity. "I think that's all of them," he said, examining his gloves for damage and finding none. "At least the ones that were in the way." No one spoke. What was there to say? They'd just witnessed someone casually destroy a space fleet, survive hard vacuum and re-entry without protection, and return to discuss it like he'd been taking out the trash. Dr. Strange felt something he rarely experienced: genuine philosophical terror, not fear for his life. He'd conquered that long ago through meditation and acceptance of mortality, but fear for the implications of what Saitama's existence meant. Because if someone could simply exist outside all rules, all limitations, all framework of power and consequence, then what did that say about everything else? About heroism, about struggle, about the very concept of meaningful conflict? If any problem could be solved by sufficient force, and if Saitama represented effectively infinite force, then what was the point of anything they did? What was the value of their powers, their training, their sacrifices, when someone could simply step on the ground and kill thousands? The existential weight of that question hung unspoken between the assembled heroes, too heavy to voice, but impossible to ignore. "Right," Steve said finally, his voice carefully controlled, maintaining command through sheer force of will. "So, Saitama, thank you for the help. You've saved a lot of lives today." Saitama nodded slightly, the gesture perfunctory and lacking any real emotion. "Sure. Can someone point me toward the nearest supermarket? Now I really do need to buy groceries." The request was so absurd, so completely divorced from the cosmic horror they just witnessed, that it actually helped ground them back in something approaching normalcy. Before anyone could respond to his question or begin processing what they'd seen, the sky changed. Not portals, not ships. Something else. Something fundamentally worse. The violet light drained away, replaced by a deeper darkness that seemed to absorb illumination rather than generate it. The air pressure shifted dramatically, every hero's ears popping simultaneously from the change. Reality itself seemed to hold its breath, the universe pausing to acknowledge the arrival of something vast and terrible. Dr. Strange's hands moved, immediately defensive spells forming on pure instinct, his face pale beneath his goatee. "Everyone defensive positions, right now." "What is it?" Tony asked, his armor's sensors going haywire, readings spiking across every spectrum in patterns that suggested something was fundamentally breaking the laws of physics just by existing. Strange's voice was tight with barely controlled dread, with the knowledge of someone who had seen possible futures and found nothing comforting in them. The fleet was just the vanguard. "He's coming." "Who?" Peter asked, though he already knew. They all knew, because there was only one entity that could command this kind of invasion force, only one being whose presence could make even Dr. Strange sound afraid. The darkness coalesced into form reality, bending around a single point in space as something vast and terrible forced its way into this dimension through sheer, overwhelming power. Thanos had arrived. The darkness took form, slowly, deliberately, as if reality needed time to accommodate something so fundamentally massive. It began as a point of singularity of absolute black that seemed to pull light into itself rather than merely blocking it. Then the point expanded, unfurling like a flower made of night, the edges crackling with energy that existed in colors the human eye wasn't designed to perceive. Space bent around the phenomenon, creating optical distortions that hurt to look at directly, that made distance and proximity lose their meaning. Then he stepped through. Thanos emerged from the dimensional tear with the slow inevitability of a mountain, forming each movement precise and economical, despite his considerable size. He stood easily 8 feet tall, his frame broad and dense with muscle that suggested impossible strength contained within organic tissue. His skin was a deep purple textured like weathered stone marked with scars that spoke of battles spanning galaxies and centuries. But it was the gauntlet that drew every eye. His left hand was encased in golden metal that seemed to pulse with inner light, the craftsmanship so perfect it appeared to be grown rather than forged. Set into the gauntlet were 6 stones, each one glowing with distinct energy that made the air around them shimmer and distort. Purple, blue, red, yellow, green, orange. The Infinity Stones. The fundamental building blocks of reality itself, harvested from across the universe and mounted on a weapon that could reshape existence. The Mad Titan had completed his collection. Thanos took a step forward onto the ruined street of Manhattan, his armored boots making contact with concrete that cracked beneath his weight. His eyes swept across the scene before him with the calculating gaze of someone assessing a chessboard, the burning city, the corpses of thousands of outriders littering the streets, the wreckage of his entire invasion fleet. Scattered across the sky, the assembled heroes of Earth 616, standing in defensive positions. And one other figure, a man in yellow standing slightly apart from the rest, hands in his pockets, expression mildly curious. Thanos' eyes lingered on Saitama for a moment longer than the others, a flicker of something crossing his face. Recognition, uncertainty. It passed too quickly to identify, replaced by the same iron certainty that had carried him through his crusade across the cosmos. "I am Thanos," he said, his voice deep and resonant, carrying across the battlefield, without need for amplification. "I have journeyed across galaxies, toppled empires, and sacrificed everything to achieve balance in a universe drowning in chaos." He raised his left hand, the Infinity Stones blazing with sudden light. "And I will not be stopped by one planet's defiance." The gauntlet hummed with gathering power, each stone contributing its unique frequency to a symphony of cosmic force. The sound was felt more than heard, resonating in bone and blood, in the fundamental particles that composed matter itself. Iron Man's sensors screamed warnings as they detected energy levels that exceeded every scale his systems could measure. Jarvis's voice in his ear was steady, but carried an undercurrent of something that might have been fear in a less advanced AI. "Sir, the energy signature from that gauntlet is reading as reality warping level. Whatever those stones are, they're operating on a scale beyond conventional physics. Recommend immediate evacuation." "Noted," Tony said, his voice tight. "But where exactly would we evacuate to if he can warp reality?" Captain America stepped forward, his shield raised, his posture one of absolute defiance despite the hopelessness of the tactical situation. Steve Rogers had faced impossible odds before, had stood against forces that should have crushed him, and he'd learned that sometimes the act of standing was victory enough. "You're not doing this, Thanos. Not here. Not anywhere." Thanos looked at Captain America with something that might have been respect in a being capable of such emotion. Admirable. Futile, but admirable. He clenched his left fist, and the space stone flared bright blue. I have ended worlds, Captain. What makes you think this one will be different? Because we're here to stop you, Thor said, Stormbreaker crackling with lightning as he stepped forward to join Steve. And we do not yield. Neither do I, Thanos said simply. Then the assault began. The heroes attacked as one coordinated through years of training and countless battles together. Iron Man and War Machine opened fire with everything they had, repulsor beams and micro-missiles creating a wall of explosive force. Thor hurled Stormbreaker with all his divine strength behind it, the weapon trailing lightning like a comet. Captain America's shield flew in a calculated arc aimed at the gauntlet itself. Doctor Strange and the sorcerers unleashed every combat spell in their arsenal. Golden bands of energy and crimson bolts of mystical force converging on the mad Titan. Cyclops' optic blast joined the barrage, a lance of concussive force that could punch through steel. Storm called down lightning from clouds that had already been summoned by Thor, doubling the electrical assault. Black Panther's Wakandan aircraft opened fire with vibranium-enhanced energy weapons. Every hero with ranged capability unleashed everything they had in a single overwhelming volley. Thanos raised his left hand almost casually. The space stone flared and space itself bent. The attack's missiles, energy beams, lightning magic vibranium rounds curved away from him as if striking an invisible sphere redirected harmlessly into the ground or skinosimon. The shield bounced off the spatial distortion and clattered to the street. Stormbreaker, imbued with the power to kill Thanos himself, slowed in mid-flight as if moving through molasses, finally stopping 3 feet from his head, suspended in twisted space. Impressive coordination, Thanos observed. Wasted on an inadequate approach. He clenched his fist again, and the space stone blazed brighter. Reality twisted, and suddenly every hero found themselves scattered across the battlefield, teleported dozens or hundreds of feet from their positions. Formation broken, coordination, disrupted advantage stolen through casual manipulation of distance itself. Thor recalled Stormbreaker to his hand with effort, the weapon fighting through the spatial distortion to return to him. He charged forward with a roar that shook the air, electricity coursing across his body, the full power of the All-Father's air on display. Thanos caught Stormbreaker mid-swing with his bare right hand. The weapon forged in the heart of a dying star, capable of channeling enough power to kill a god, stopped completely in the mad Titan's grip. Lightning crackled and danced across his purple skin, leaving scorch marks that faded almost immediately as alien biology repaired cellular damage faster than Thor could inflict it. I have fought gods before, Thanos said, looking Thor in the eyes with something approaching pity. You are not the first. You will not be the last. The Power Stone flared purple, and Thanos drove his fist into Thor's chest with force that could shatter planets. The God of Thunder flew backward, crashing through a building, the structure collapsing around him. Hulk emerged from the rubble where Bruce had been standing, the transformation instant and fueled by pure rage at watching his ally fall. He charged with the straightforward fury that had served him in countless battles. His massive fists raised to pummel this new threat into submission. Thanos met the charge head-on. The two titans clashed in the middle of the street, fist against fist, raw strength against raw strength. The impact cratered the pavement for 50 feet in every direction, sent shockwaves through nearby buildings, cracked windows that had somehow survived the battle thus far. For 3 seconds, they were evenly matched. Hulk's gamma-enhanced muscles straining against Thanos' genetically perfected form, both beings pushing with enough force to move tectonic plates. Then Thanos smiled. The Power Stone blazed, and suddenly the match wasn't even close. Thanos' next punch sent Hulk flying. His next caught the green giant mid-leap and slammed him into the ground hard enough to create a crater. The Mad Titan grabbed Hulk by the ankle and used him as a club, smashing him repeatedly into the pavement before hurling him away like a discarded toy. Hulk didn't get up. "Is this the best Earth has to offer?" Thanos asked, his voice carrying disappointment. "I had hoped for more resistance, more significance to this moment." Doctor Strange attacked from 3 directions, simultaneously using mirror dimension duplicates to surround Thanos, while his real self hung back hands, moving through complex patterns. Crimson bands of Sitarak wrapped around the Mad Titan's arms, legendary restraints that had held beings of cosmic power. 7 rings of dimensional energy formed around his torso, constricting, meant to cut through anything they enclosed. Thanos flexed, and the Reality Stone turned red. The bands became butterflies. The rings became smoke. Strange's duplicates shattered like glass, the mirror dimension collapsing, as reality itself rejected the illusion. Thanos pointed at Strange with his gauntlet hand, and suddenly the sorcerer was encased in stone, trapped mid-spell, unable to move or cast. "Magic," Thanos said with something like amusement. "I control reality itself, sorcerer. Your tricks are meaningless." The Mind Stone glowed yellow, and suddenly every hero on the battlefield felt pressure inside their skulls. Tony's armor systems glitched and failed, Jarvis's voice cutting out mid-warning. Peter collapsed, holding his head, his enhanced senses turning against him as the stone overwhelmed his nervous system. Storm fell from the sky, her connection to weather severed by mental interference. The X-Men clutched their heads, Jean Grey's telepathy trying and failing to shield them from an assault on consciousness itself. Thanos was systematically dismantling Earth's defenders with the casual efficiency of someone who'd done this countless times before across countless worlds. Captain America pushed through the mental assault through sheer stubborn will, forcing his legs to move his shield to rise. He charged Thanos alone, knowing it was hopeless, knowing he couldn't win, but refusing to stop fighting, because that was what Steve Rogers did. That was who he was. His shield struck the gauntlet with all the force he could muster behind it. The vibranium Earth's most indestructible material cracked, not shattered, not destroyed. But a hairline fracture appeared in its surface, and Steve felt it in the impact, felt his weapon failing for the first time in his long career. Thanos looked down at him with something that might have been respect. "You have heart, soldier. I can appreciate that." He raised the gauntlet. But heart changes nothing. The Soul Stone blazed orange, and Captain America screamed. It wasn't physical pain. It was something deeper, more fundamental. The stone was pulling at his essence, at the fundamental energy that made him Steve Rogers, threatening to tear soul from body. He fell to his knees, his shield clattering from nerveless fingers, every bit of his enhanced willpower focused on simply remaining conscious. Thanos released him, letting Steve collapse to the ground, still breathing, but broken in ways that went beyond flesh and bone. The battlefield had gone silent. Every hero was down unconscious, trapped, scattered, or simply too injured to continue. The Mad Titan stood in the center of the devastation he'd created in less than 2 minutes, the Infinity Gauntlet glowing with barely restrained power. "I take no pleasure in this," Thanos said, and his voice actually carried a note of genuine regret. "But the universe requires balance, order, and I am the only one with the will to achieve it." He raised his left hand high, all 6 infinity stones blazing with light that hurt to perceive. The air itself began to vibrate reality, recognizing that something fundamental was about to occur. With a snap of my fingers, half of all life in the universe will cease to exist. Perfectly random, perfectly fair. A mercy to a cosmos drowning in its own excess. His thumb moved toward his middle finger, preparing for the snap that would reshape all of existence. Saitama, who had been standing perfectly still throughout the entire battle, watching with that same expression of mild interest, finally spoke. "Hey." Thanos paused, his attention shifting to the man in yellow he'd almost forgotten about, the one variable he hadn't accounted for, the figure that didn't fit into any tactical assessment he'd made of Earth's defenses. "That seems excessive," Saitama said, his tone carrying the same flat delivery he used for everything. "Killing half of everyone. That's a lot of people." "It is necessary," Thanos said, his voice carrying absolute certainty. "I have seen civilizations collapse under their own weight, watched as resources dwindled and entire species tore themselves apart, fighting over scraps. This is mercy. This is salvation through sacrifice." "Sounds like murder to me," Saitama said, taking his hands out of his pockets for the first time since Thanos had arrived. "I'm pretty sure that's not okay." Thanos studied him more carefully, now his tactical mind analyzing this unusual opponent. The man showed no fear, no anger, no recognition of the power Thanos wielded. Just mild disapproval, as if Thanos had suggested something in poor taste rather than cosmic genocide. "Who are you to challenge me?" Thanos asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "You stand where gods have fallen. You speak of morality while wielding no apparent power. What makes you think you can stop what I have set in motion?" "I'm Saitama," he said. "Just a hero for fun." Something in those words, in the absolute lack of pretension or fear behind them, gave Thanos pause. The Mad Titan had faced countless opponents, had studied the psychology of resistance, knew how beings reacted when confronted with overwhelming force. Fear, rage, desperation, determination. He'd seen them all, but this was different. This was a man who genuinely didn't seem to understand why he should be afraid. Who looked at the Infinity Gauntlet with the same mild interest someone might give a new kitchen appliance. Thanos accessed the Soul Stone's perception, looking deeper, trying to understand what made this being so fundamentally different from every other opponent he'd faced. What he saw made him hesitate. Because the Soul Stone, which could perceive the fundamental essence of all living things, which could measure the weight and quality of any soul in the universe, returned readings that made no sense. Saitama registered simultaneously as nothing and everything, as a void that somehow contained infinite depth, as a mathematical impossibility that had achieved consciousness. The stone couldn't categorize him, couldn't understand him, could barely acknowledge he existed. "What are you?" Thanos asked, and for the first time in decades, there was uncertainty in his voice. "I already told you," Saitama said. "I'm a hero." Thanos made a decision. This variable, this unknown factor, needed to be eliminated before proceeding with his great work. He raised the gauntlet and activated the Space Stone, intending to teleport this strange being into the heart of a star. Space warped around Saitama, the same technique that had scattered the heroes earlier that should have transported him across any distance Thanos desired. Nothing happened. Saitama remained standing exactly where he was, apparently unaffected by spatial manipulation that should have been absolute. Thanos tried again, pouring more power into the stone warping space so severely that the air around Saitama became visible from pure distortion. Still nothing. Okay, Thanos said slowly, his tactical mind racing through options. You're immune to spatial manipulation. Interesting. He activated the reality stone, rewriting the local fabric of existence. The ground beneath Saitama should have become lava, the air around him should have turned to acid. His body should have been transformed into something harmless and inert. Reality changed all around Saitama. The street melted. The air shimmered with corrosive energy. Buildings transformed into impossible geometries. Saitama stood unchanged, apparently existing in a bubble where Thanos' reality manipulation simply didn't apply. More interesting, Thanos murmured. He activated the Time Stone, attempting to age Saitama into dust or reverse him to a state before existence. Time rippled and twisted around Saitama, centuries passing in seconds, causality bending into loops and paradoxes. Saitama blinked, looking around at the temporal distortions with mild confusion, like someone who'd walked into a room and forgotten why they'd come. "Are you doing something?" he asked. For the first time in his centuries-long crusade, Thanos felt something approaching genuine concern. The Infinity Stones were the most powerful artifacts in the universe. They controlled the fundamental forces of existence itself. They should be absolute within this reality. But this being in yellow apparently existed outside the framework that the stones controlled. "You're not from this universe," Thanos said, understanding dawning. "You're from somewhere else. Somewhere the Infinity Stones have no jurisdiction." "I told you," Saitama said, sounding slightly annoyed at having to repeat himself. Wrong turn. Thanos' strategic mind recalculated rapidly. If the stones couldn't affect this being directly, then perhaps they could affect everything around him. He activated the Power Stone, channeling its energy, not at Saitama, but at the ground beneath him, intending to hit him with a shockwave that would level Manhattan and everything in it. Purple energy erupted from the gauntlet, a beam of raw power that could crack planets that had reduced civilizations to ash. It struck the ground between Thanos and Saitama, releasing force measured in megatons. The explosion was spectacular. Buildings vaporized. The street became a crater hundreds of feet deep. The shockwave leveled everything within a mile radius that hadn't already been destroyed by the battle. When the dust cleared, Thanos stood at one edge of the crater, his armor scorched but intact, the gauntlet still glowing. Saitama stood at the other edge, completely unharmed. Not even Dusty, looking down at the destruction with that same expression of mild interest. "That was loud," he observed. Thanos stood perfectly still for 3 seconds, his mind processing tactical information that refused to make sense. He had the Infinity Gauntlet. He controlled reality, space-time, mind, soul, and power itself. He had used these stones to defeat cosmic entities, to reshape worlds, to challenge forces that predated civilization. And none of it worked on this being in yellow. "You cannot be killed," Thanos said, speaking more to himself than to Saitama. "Cannot be moved, cannot be altered, cannot be affected by any force I can bring to bear. You are an absolute, an unmovable object." "I wouldn't say that," Saitama said. "I'm just durable." Thanos laughed, the sound carrying no humor, only a kind of awful realization. "Then perhaps," he said, his voice dropping to something dangerous, "the solution is not to affect you, but to complete my task, regardless of your presence." He raised his gauntlet hand high, all 6 stones blazing with power so intense that the air ignited around them. If he couldn't eliminate this variable, he would simply proceed with his plan and trust that even this being couldn't undo what the Infinity Stones were about to accomplish. "When I snap my fingers," Thanos said, "half of all life in the universe will cease to exist, including everyone on this planet, including everyone you might care about." Can you stop the snap itself, hero? Can you move faster than thought? He brought his thumb toward his middle finger, preparing for the gesture that would reshape existence. Saitama took a step forward. Just one step, but the ground cracked beneath his foot, and Thanos felt something he hadn't felt in decades, the primal recognition of a predator moving to strike. I'm going to stop you. Saitama said, his voice still flat, still emotionless, but now carrying something underneath it. Intent. Purpose. The decision made. You're not killing anyone. For the first time since he'd begun his crusade, Thanos looked at an opponent and wasn't certain he would win. The Mad Titan smiled, and it was the smile of someone who'd finally found a challenge worthy of the Infinity Gauntlet's full power. Then let us see. Thanos said, what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. The battle for the universe was about to begin. The standoff lasted 3 seconds. That felt like eternity. Thanos stood at one edge of the massive crater, the Infinity Gauntlet blazing with barely restrained power. 6 cosmic forces incarnate waiting to be unleashed. Saitama stood at the other edge, hands at his sides, now his posture relaxed but somehow final, like a door closing on negotiation. Between them, the ruins of Manhattan burned. The fallen heroes lay scattered across the battlefield. Some unconscious, some conscious, but unable to move, all of them. Watching this moment with the horrified fascination of people witnessing something that would reshape their understanding of power itself. Doctor Strange still trapped in stone, but conscious used every fragment of mystical awareness available to him to observe what was about to happen. He couldn't move, couldn't cast, but his mind was free to analyze, to predict, to calculate probabilities across infinite timelines. What he saw made no sense. Every possible future should branch from this moment, billions of outcomes, each one slightly different, based on minute variations in choice and chance. But when Strange tried to look forward, tried to see what would happen next, the timelines simply stopped. Not converged into darkness like death or failure, but stopped as if causality itself had encountered something it couldn't process and given up trying. Saitama was the blockage, the point where prediction failed, the variable that broke the mathematics of fate. Thanos saw Strange's mystical awareness probing the future and understood what it meant. The sorcerer was trying to find a path to victory, searching through infinite possibilities for the one thread that led to triumph, and finding nothing. There is no future where you win this, sorcerer, Thanos said, his voice carrying across the crater. I have already seen every possibility, every outcome. The stones showed me the path, and it leads only to balance. He raised his left hand, and the reality stone pulsed with crimson light. The stone around Doctor Strange shattered, but before the sorcerer could move, his arms were bound by chains that seemed to be made of solidified space itself, courtesy of the space stone. Thanos wasn't taking chances anymore. I'm going to give you all one final opportunity, Thanos said, addressing the assembled heroes with the tone of someone making a generous offer they didn't deserve. Stand down. Accept what must happen, and I will ensure your deaths in the snap are painless. You will simply cease without suffering, without fear. It is more mercy than countless others have received. Iron Man's armor had rebooted enough for basic functions. Tony's voice came through speakers damaged by the Mind Stone's assault, crackling but defiant. We don't negotiate with mass murders. That's kind of our whole thing. Then you die with the knowledge that your defiance changed nothing, Thanos said simply. He turned his attention back to Saitama, the only being present who seemed capable of interfering with his plan. The Mad Titan's strategic mind had already run through hundreds of scenarios, calculating approaches and outcomes, with the precision of someone who'd spent centuries perfecting the art of conquest. The Infinity Stones couldn't affect Saitama directly, that much was now established. But Thanos hadn't survived as long as he had by relying on single strategies. If direct assault failed, there were other approaches. "Tell me, hero." Thanos set his voice almost conversational. "Do you understand what the Infinity Stones are? What they represent?" Saitama looked at the gauntlet with that same mild curiosity. "They're the glowing rocks on your glove, right?" "They are the fundamental forces of existence itself, crystallized into physical form at the moment this universe was born. Space-time reality, power mind, soul are everything that allows existence to exist. And I control them all." Thanos clenched his fist, and all 6 stones blazed simultaneously. "I am in this moment functionally omnipotent within this reality." "That sounds complicated," Saitama said. "And yet, you are immune to their power," Thanos continued, ignoring the interruption. "You exist outside the framework they control, a being from another reality, perhaps another set of fundamental laws entirely. Fascinating." He paused, considering. "But your immunity is personal, is it not? It applies only to you." Saitama's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted slightly, a subtle tension that suggested he understood where this was going. "The people around you," Thanos said, gesturing at the fallen heroes. "These warriors who fought so valiantly. They are very much subject to the stone's power, as is everyone else in this universe." "Don't," Saitama said, and for the first time there was an edge in his voice. Not anger, not quite, but something harder than the usual flat delivery. "I wonder," Thanos mused as if considering an interesting puzzle. "Can you move fast enough to stop a snap? Can you cross this distance before my fingers meet?" "It's an interesting question." He brought his thumb and middle finger close together, not quite touching the gesture, holding all of existence hostage. Saitama moved. Not the casual walk he'd used earlier, not the lazy punches that had killed thousands. This was different. This was Saitama actually trying to be fast. He crossed the 100 feet between them in what appeared to be a single step, his fist already moving toward Thanos' face, with enough force to destroy everything in a 10-mile radius if it connected. Thanos smiled. The time stone blazed green, and suddenly Saitama was back where he'd started, his fist striking only air. Time had reversed for him by exactly the seconds needed to undo his movement, returning him to his starting position. Thanos snapped his fingers. The sound was small, insignificant. A tiny click of finger against thumb, barely audible over the ambient noise of the burning city. The effect was universal. The Infinity Stones blazed with light so intense, it bleached color from the world so bright that even looking away wasn't enough to escape it. Every being in the universe felt it simultaneously, a presence touching their fundamental essence, their soul making a decision with the random finality of a coin flip. Heads you live, tails you die. On the battlefield, Tony Stark felt something impossible happening. His HUD showed biological signatures winking out across the globe in real time. Millions of them. Billions. Half of all life making the transition from existence to void in the span of a heartbeat. Peter Parker looked down at his hands and saw them beginning to dissolve, pixels of his being scattering into dust. "Mr. Stark," he said, his voice small and confused and impossibly young. "I don't feel so good." He stumbled, fell into Tony's arms, still dissolving, still fading. "I don't want to go," Peter said, and there were tears on his face as teenage bravado crumbled before the reality of mortality. "I don't want to go. Please, I don't—" He was gone, dust scattering on the wind. A child who'd tried to be a hero erased from existence by the whim of cosmic force and random chance. Tony knelt there, arms empty, staring at the space where Peter had been. His mind so quick and analytical, so used to processing information and finding solutions, simply stopped. There was no solution, no clever quip, no technological miracle that could bring back someone who'd ceased to exist at the fundamental level. Across the battlefield, more began to fade. Half of the surviving Wakandan warriors dissolved into dust, their technology and training, meaning nothing against erasure at the cosmic level. 2 of the Dora Milaje vanished, leaving Okoye staring at empty space where her sisters had stood seconds before. Storm began to fade, her eyes going wide with realization before she scattered into particles that drifted away on winds she could no longer command. Falcon disintegrated mid-flight, his wings falling empty to the ground. Bruce Banner collapsed, clutching his chest, feeling the green rage inside him, fighting against annihilation and losing. Hulk couldn't punch death, couldn't smash oblivion. Bruce whispered something that might have been an apology or a goodbye, before he too became dust. Bucky Barnes, who'd survived decades as a weapon, who'd clawed his way back from programming and trauma to reclaim his humanity, looked at Steve Rogers with an expression of heartbreak and whispered, "Steve," before dissolving. Steve caught the dust that had been his oldest friend, watching it slip through his fingers, and something inside Captain America that had never broken before finally cracked. Dr. Strange felt it coming, felt the Soul Stone's judgment falling on him. He looked at Tony Stark, at the man he'd bargained Dormammu's realm to protect, the man who was supposed to be crucial to some future victory, and wondered if he'd made the right choice. There was no other way, Strange said, though he wasn't sure anymore if he believed it. Then he was gone. Half of the X-Men dissolved. Half of the sorcerers of Kamar Taj scattered to nothing. Half of every surviving soldier, civilian, hero, and bystander felt the universe's random judgment fall upon them and found themselves wanting. Wong remained. Okoye remained. War Machine, Cyclops, Black Widow. And standing in the middle of the crater, completely untouched, was Saitama. The dust of the fallen drifted around him, particles of people who had existed seconds before now, nothing but ash on the wind. He stood perfectly still, his expression unreadable, watching as half of everyone simply ceased to be. Thanos lowered his hand slowly, the gauntlet smoking slightly from the cosmic forces it had channeled. He looked down at the damage the metal warped, the stone's light dimmed his left arm, charred from fingertips to shoulder. The snap had taken more from him than he'd anticipated, the power required to affect all of existence, burning him even as it reshaped reality. But it was done. He looked across the crater at Saitama and found the man still standing there, unchanged, unaffected. The snap had touched every living thing in the universe, except one. "Interesting," Thanos said, his voice carrying the strain of channeling that much power, but still maintaining its certainty. "The stones cannot touch you. Even an act that affects all of existence simultaneously leaves you untouched. You truly are outside their jurisdiction." Saitama didn't respond. He was looking around at the dust, at the empty spaces where people had been standing, at Tony Stark kneeling and holding nothing where Peter Parker had dissolved. "You're fast," Thanos continued, settling into lecture mode despite his exhaustion. "Faster than any being I've encountered. But the Time Stone is faster than speed itself. It doesn't move through space to reach its target. It simply rewrites the moments that have already occurred. You cannot outrun causality being rewritten. Saitama's fists clenched at his sides. They're gone, he said quietly. Half of them, yes, Thanos confirmed. Perfectly random, perfectly fair. Rich and poor, strong and weak, hero and villain. The universe has been balanced. You killed them. I saved the universe, Thanos corrected. Countless civilizations will now have the resources to survive. The suffering I have witnessed across galaxies will be averted. This was mercy on a cosmic scale. You killed them. Saitama repeated, his voice still flat, but now carrying something underneath it. Something cold. Thanos had heard many things in his enemies' voices over the centuries. Fear, rage, desperation, hatred. He'd learned to recognize and categorize them all, to use them tactically, to understand the psychology of those who opposed him. What he heard in Saitama's voice was none of those things. It was simpler, more fundamental. It was the sound of someone deciding that something was unacceptable, and that decision being absolute and final. I suppose this is where you attack me, Thanos said, raising the gauntlet again, despite the pain it caused his damaged arm. Where you attempt to avenge the fallen and reverse what has been done. I should warn you, the gauntlet is damaged, yes, but still functional, and I have no intention of dying here. Saitama started walking toward him, not running, not charging, just walking with steady, measured steps across the cratered ground. You can't kill me, Thanos said, more to himself than to Saitama. I've already tested that. The stones cannot affect you, which means I cannot simply erase you from existence. But I can use the time stone to reverse any damage you inflict. I can use the space stone to maintain distance. I'm going to hit you now, Saitama said, still walking, still approaching with that same steady pace. With what result? Thanos asked, genuinely curious, despite the situation. You can harm me, perhaps. You may even be strong enough to damage me significantly. But I have the power to undo any injury, to reset any damage. We are at an impasse. I'm going to hit you, Saitama repeated, and you're going to stay hit. There was something in the certainty of that statement that gave Thanos pause. Not a threat, not bravado, just a simple statement of intent delivered with the same flat finality someone might use to describe gravity or entropy. Thanos made a decision. If he couldn't defeat this anomaly, couldn't erase him, couldn't even slow him down reliably, then the only option was to ensure the anomaly couldn't undo what had been accomplished. He activated the space stone and teleported. Not far. Just to the other side of the planet, putting Earth's mass between himself and Saitama. Buying time to recover, to think, to plan an approach that could account for this impossible variable. He would return. Would face this being eventually. But not now. Not when the gauntlet was damaged and his body was burned and half of all life had just been erased, requiring him to consolidate power and ensure the universe accepted its new balance. Thanos vanished in a flash of blue light space, folding around him and depositing him in a location where he could recover without immediate threat. Saitama stopped walking, looking at the empty space where Thanos had been standing. He stood there for several seconds, expressionless, before turning to look at the surviving heroes. Tony was still kneeling where Peter had died. His armor's faceplate retracted, his face streaked with tears he didn't bother to hide. Steve Rogers sat in the dust that had been Bucky Barnes, his shield lying forgotten beside him. War Machine stood perfectly still, trying to process the fact that half of everyone had just stopped existing and he'd survived through nothing but random chance. The remaining X-Men were counting their losses. Half of them were gone. Cyclops remained, but John was dust. Beast had survived, but Storm was wind. Okoye stood among the remains of her warriors, her face carved from stone, refusing to show the grief that was destroying her from inside. Wong knelt where Dr. Strange had been the master he'd served for years, reduced to nothing, leaving him as the last sorcerer of consequence in a world that would need magic now more than ever. The silence on the battlefield was absolute. Not even the sound of breathing broke it, as if the universe itself was holding its breath, trying to process what had just occurred. Saitama walked over to where Tony was kneeling. He stopped a few feet away, looking down at the man in the damaged armor. "I'm sorry," Saitama said quietly. "I tried to stop him." Tony looked up at him, and there was something wild in his eyes, something broken that even his genius couldn't fix. "You tried," Tony said, his voice hollow. "You moved faster than anything I've ever seen, and it wasn't enough. Because he can just rewind time, can just undo speed itself." He laughed, and it was not a sane sound. What's the point of anything if someone can just erase half the universe with a snap? Saitama didn't have an answer for that. Steve Rogers stood up slowly, picked up his cracked shield, and walked over to join them. His face was pale, his eyes red, but his jaw was set with determination that even cosmic horror couldn't completely break. "We find Thanos," Steve said, his voice steady through sheer force of will. "We make him undo this. We bring everyone back." "How?" Tony asked, and the word was almost a sob. "How do we fight something that controls reality itself, that can reverse time, manipulate space, alter matter at will? He's effectively God with that gauntlet." "Then we take away the gauntlet," Steve said simply. "He'll see us coming. He'll reverse time or teleport or turn us into butterflies or any of 1,000 other things. We can't even get close to him." Tony gestured at Saitama. "He's the only one who's immune to the stone's power, and even he couldn't land a hit before Thanos snapped." Saitama was still looking at the dust on the ground, at the spaces where people had been. His expression hadn't changed, but there was something in his eyes now. Something that hadn't been there before. Intent. "Where did he go?" Saitama asked. "I don't know," Tony said. "Could be anywhere on Earth. Could be anywhere in the universe. The space stone lets him go anywhere." "Then I'll look everywhere," Saitama said. He started to crouch, preparing to jump, but Steve's hand on his shoulder stopped him. "Wait," Steve said. "We need a plan. We need to coordinate. If you find him, you need to be able to actually stop him, not just punch him before he reverses time again." "I'll figure it out," Saitama said. "How?" Tony asked, some of his analytical mind reasserting itself despite the trauma. "You're strong, impossibly strong, but strength doesn't matter if he can just undo whatever you do. We need a way to counter the time stone specifically." Saitama looked at Tony, at Steve, at the assembled survivors of the snap. Heroes who'd lost friends, allies, loved ones, who were trying to figure out how to fight back against something that had just demonstrated it could erase existence itself. "I'm going to hit him harder than he can reverse," Saitama said, as if this was obvious. "That's not how time works," Tony started to say. "I don't care how time works," Saitama interrupted, and there was still no emotion in his voice, but the words carried weight anyway. "He killed half of everyone. That's not okay. I'm going to stop him." Before anyone could argue further, Saitama crouched and leaped. The ground beneath him shattered a crater forming from the force of his departure. He shot into the sky, accelerating past the speed of sound, past the speed of bullets, past anything that should be possible for a being moving through atmosphere. Within seconds, he was out of sight. The surviving heroes stood in the ruins of Manhattan, surrounded by the dust of the fallen, and tried to process what they were supposed to do next. Tony's HUD was showing the global casualty numbers. Billions dead. Half of all life on Earth simply gone. The news networks were already reporting chaos worldwide. Planes falling as pilots dissolved, cars crashing as drivers ceased to exist, power grids failing as half of the engineers maintaining them became dust. Civilization was collapsing in real time. "We need to get to the Avengers compound," Steve said, forcing himself into command mode because someone had to. "Coordinate with whoever's left. Figure out what we're dealing with and how to respond." "Respond to what?" Tony asked, his voice raw. "Half of everyone is gone, Steve. Gone. Not dead we could deal with. Dead leaves bodies, leaves something to bury, something to mourn. They're just nothing. And the man who did it is functionally omnipotent and can teleport anywhere in the universe. Then we figure out how to beat someone omnipotent," Steve said with the stubborn determination that had carried him through 70 years of impossible fights. "Because that's what we do. We don't give up. We don't stop fighting. Not ever." Tony looked at him, at the man who'd been a symbol of hope and determination for longer than Tony had been alive, and felt something crack inside him. Because Steve was right. They didn't give up. They kept fighting no matter the odds. But this felt different. This felt like fighting against the fundamental laws of reality itself. "Okay," Tony said quietly. "Okay, we coordinate. We plan. We figure out how to take down a god." He looked up at the sky where Saitama had disappeared. "And we hope that whatever the hell that guy is, he can do what we can't." Somewhere on the other side of Earth, Thanos sat in a ruined building looking down at his damaged gauntlet. The stones still glowed, but dimmer now, their power depleted by the act of reshaping all of existence. He had succeeded. Half of all life in the universe had been erased, perfectly balanced, as all things should be. But there was a complication. A being that existed outside the stone's authority. A variable that broke every calculation, a force that Thanos couldn't control, couldn't predict, couldn't eliminate. And somewhere out there, that force was looking for him. Thanos closed his eyes and reached out with the Soul Stone, trying to sense Saitama's approach, trying to buy himself time to heal and prepare. What he sensed made him open his eyes again. Saitama was moving across Earth's surface at speeds that should have been impossible, covering continents in seconds, his presence unmistakable to the Soul Stone's perception. Not because he had a strong soul or a unique essence, but because he registered as an absence, a void moving through the world, erasing his surroundings from the Soul Stone's sight simply by being near them. Thanos calculated trajectories and speeds. At Saitama's current rate, he would search every square mile of Earth's surface in approximately 20 minutes. 20 minutes to prepare a defense against something that had proven immune to cosmic power. 20 minutes to figure out how to win a fight against someone who broke the rules simply by existing. The Mad Titan stood his damaged arm, sending spikes of agony through his nervous system, and began to plan. Because if there was one thing Thanos understood, it was that victory went not to the strongest, but to the one who was willing to sacrifice everything to achieve their goal. And Thanos had already sacrificed his soul. The question was, what had Saitama sacrificed to become what he was? That question, Thanos suspected, would determine who won the battle to come. Saitama found him in Tibet. 17 minutes had passed since the snap. 17 minutes of Saitama moving across Earth's surface at speeds that turned continents into blurs, his eyes scanning his senses, reaching for the anomaly that was Thanos. A being who warped reality simply by existing with that much power concentrated in one location. The mad Titan had chosen to make his stand in the ruins of an ancient monastery high in the mountains, where the air was thin and the world felt closer to the sky than to the earth below. Fitting perhaps for a confrontation between forces that had transcended conventional limitation. Saitama landed in the courtyard with enough force to crack stone that had stood for centuries. Dust rose around his feet, settling slowly in the thin air. He straightened, looked around at the empty buildings, the prayer flags fluttering in wind that carried the scent of snow. Thanos sat on a stone bench in the center of the courtyard, his damaged gauntlet resting on his knee. The stones still glowed, but their light was dimmer now, flickering like candles in wind. His left arm was blackened from fingertips to shoulder, the flesh charred and cracked, healing slowly through alien biology that refused to simply die. 17 minutes, Thanos said, his voice carrying clearly despite the wind. I estimated 20. You're faster than I calculated. Saitama didn't respond. He just started walking toward Thanos with that same steady pace he'd used in Manhattan. Before we begin, Thanos said, raising his right hand in a gesture that wasn't quite surrender, but wasn't aggression either. I want you to understand something. What I did was not evil. It was necessity. The universe was dying hero, drowning in its own excess. I have watched civilizations collapse under their own weight, seen entire species tear themselves apart, fighting over dwindling resources. The snap was mercy. You killed half of everyone, Saitama said, still walking. I saved the other half, Thanos countered. And in doing so, I saved countless trillions who would have died in the wars and famines that were coming. Can you not see the mathematics of it, the pure logic? I don't care about your math, Saitama said. He was 20 feet away now. Thanos stood, his massive frame unfolding with careful precision. Despite his injuries, despite the exhaustion that came from channeling cosmic power, he moved with the grace of a warrior who'd spent centuries perfecting the art of violence. Then you care only for revenge, Thanos said. How disappointing. I had hoped you might understand. I understand, Saitama said. You decided you knew better than everyone else. You decided who should live and who should die. You made yourself judge of all life in the universe. He stopped 10 feet away, his fists clenching at his sides. That's not okay. And you, Thanos said, decided to oppose me. You made yourself my judge. How is that different? I'm not killing anyone, Saitama said simply. No. Thanos agreed. You're just going to try to kill me. And in doing so, you'll ensure that the snap remains permanent, that half of all life stays dead, because only I know how to use the gauntlet to reverse it. Have you thought about that? About the consequences of your revenge? Saitama paused, and for just a moment, uncertainty flickered across his face. Thanos pressed the advantage. I am the only being in this universe who can bring them back. The gauntlet is attuned to me, bound to my will, through the sacrifice I made to claim the Soul Stone. If you kill me, everyone who died in the snap stays dead. Permanently. Billions of lives lost forever because you wanted satisfaction. The silence stretched for several seconds. Then Saitama said, Then I'll hit you until you bring them back. Thanos actually smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. There it is. The simplicity I've come to expect from you. Very well. He raised the gauntlet, ignoring the pain the movement caused. Let us see if your strength exceeds my control over reality itself. The Power Stone blazed purple. Thanos punched the ground with his gauntlet hand, channeling the stone's energy into the earth itself. The monastery exploded. Not metaphorically, the entire structure, every building, every stone erupted upward in a column of purple energy that reached into the stratosphere. The mountain beneath them split tectonic plates, grinding as force measured in megatons transferred through solid rock. The shockwave leveled everything for 10 miles in every direction. Snow sublimated instantly from the heat. Stone vaporized. The air itself ignited from compression. When the light faded and the dust began to settle, Thanos stood in a crater half a mile wide, breathing heavily, his damaged arms smoking. Saitama stood 50 feet away, completely unharmed, not even dusty. "You can't hurt me with energy," Saitama said. "I thought we already established that." "I established," Thanos said, "that the stones cannot affect you directly. But energy is different. Energy is merely power expressed through physical force. And you, for all your immunity to cosmic manipulation, still interact with the physical world." The Power Stone flared again, and this time Thanos didn't aim at Saitama. He aimed at the space around him, creating a sphere of pure destructive force that collapsed inward like a star going supernova in reverse. Pressure beyond anything found in nature, heat that would shame nuclear fire force that could crack planets. The sphere collapsed, imploded, released its energy in a flash of purple light. Saitama walked out of it, his suit slightly smoking, but otherwise intact. "Interesting," Thanos murmured. "The energy affects you, but not enough. Not nearly enough." His tactical mind raced through possibilities, discarding options as they proved inadequate. "You're durable beyond any scale I can damage." "Very well." He activated the Space Stone. Space twisted, and suddenly Thanos was behind Saitama. His right fist, already in motion, aimed at the back of his head with force that could shatter moons. No cosmic power, no stone energy. Just raw physical strength from a being who'd fought gods hand to hand and won. The punch connected. Saitama's head moved forward approximately 1 inch from the impact. Then he turned around his neck, rotating to bring his face toward Thanos, the Mad Titan's fist still pressed against the back of his skull. "That tickled a little," Saitama said. Then he punched Thanos in the chest. The impact was not explosive. There was no shockwave, no energy release, no dramatic visual effect. The fist simply moved forward at normal speed and connected with Thanos' armor. The armor shattered. The ribs beneath it broke. Thanos flew backward at supersonic speed, his body carving a trench through the mountain for 2 miles before finally coming to rest, embedded in solid rock. He coughed blood, feeling his alien biology struggling to repair catastrophic damage. Ribs were regenerating organs, knitting back together, but slowly. Too slowly. He activated the Time Stone before Saitama could reach him, reversing his own injuries by 10 seconds. The damage undid itself, ribs unbreaking organs, unrupturing his body, restored to pre-punch condition. Saitama appeared in front of him, having crossed 2 miles in the seconds it took Thanos to heal. "That's cheating," Saitama observed. "That's survival," Thanos corrected, teleporting again with the Space Stone. This time he appeared 100 feet above Saitama, his gauntlet aimed downward, all 6 stones blazing simultaneously. He'd tested direct assault and found it wanting. He'd tested overwhelming force and found it insufficient. Time to test combination. The Reality Stone activated, first transforming the air around Saitama into solid tungsten, attempting to trap him in metal that materialized inside his body as well as around it. The Space Stone activated, second compressing that space down. to a point attempting to crush Saitama through spatial manipulation rather than force. The Time Stone activated third, attempting to age the tungsten to dust, while keeping Saitama's position in space locked. The Mind Stone activated fourth, not targeting Saitama, but the space around him, creating a field of pure psionic force that should have disrupted any consciousness within it. The Power Stone activated fifth, pouring raw energy into the construct, amplifying every other effect exponentially. The Soul Stone activated last, attempting to affect Saitama at the fundamental level of existence itself, trying to find any anchor point it could use to harm him. The combined assault was something that could have erased planets from existence, could have rewritten the fundamental nature of reality in localized space, could have killed gods and cosmic beings and anything that operated within the conventional framework of universal law. Saitama stood up from where he'd been kneeling to get better leverage and looked up at Thanos with mild annoyance. "Are you done?" he asked. The tungsten around him simply wasn't there anymore, not disintegrated or broken, but as if it had never existed. The spatial compression had failed to compress him. The temporal manipulation had affected everything except him. The psionic field had washed over him like water over stone. The power amplification had amplified nothing. The soul attack had found no purchase. Thanos stared down at him from 100 feet up, his mind racing through options and finding them exhausted. Every technique he'd perfected over centuries of conquest, every application of the Infinity Stones he'd mastered, every trick and tactic and strategy, none of it worked on this being. This impossible being who broke rules simply by existing. "You're running out of ideas," Saitama said. Then he jumped. The crater beneath him deepened by 100 feet from the force of his leap. He shot upward, accelerating past the speed of sound, past the speed of bullets, covering 100 feet in a fraction of a second. Thanos teleported, putting a mile of distance between them. Saitama adjusted mid-air, his trajectory changing, despite having no thrust, no force, no apparent means of altering his momentum. He simply changed direction because he wanted to physics, offering no complaint, and continued toward Thanos. Thanos teleported again, and again, and again, putting continents between them, then oceans, then hemispheres. Saitama followed. Every time Thanos appeared somewhere new, Saitama would adjust course and arrow toward him like a missile that couldn't be escaped. The Time Stone could reverse his movement, but only for seconds, and those seconds weren't enough. The Space Stone could move Thanos away, but no distance was too far for Saitama to cross. They circled the globe 3 times in the span of a minute, Thanos teleporting desperately, Saitama pursuing with relentless patience, the gap closing incrementally with each jump. On the 4th teleport, Thanos miscalculated. He appeared in low Earth orbit, thinking the vacuum of space might slow Saitama down, might give him time to think and plan, and find some approach that could work. Saitama arrived 5 seconds later, his trajectory carrying him up through the atmosphere without apparent concern for the lack of oxygen or the temperatures of re-entry. He hung in space across from Thanos, the Earth turning slowly beneath them, stars scattered across the black void above. "You can survive in vacuum," Thanos said, his voice carrying through magic or technology, or simply because sound was irrelevant at this scale. "Of course you can. Why would physics constrain you when nothing else does?" "I'm getting tired of chasing you," Saitama said. "Then stop," Thanos suggested. "Return to Earth. Mourn your dead. Leave me to ensure the balance I've created remains stable. This doesn't have to end in violence." "You're going to bring them back," Saitama said. "All of them." "I cannot," Thanos said, and for the first time there was something approaching genuine regret in his voice. "The gauntlet is damaged. Using it again might destroy it entirely. Even if I wanted to reverse the snap, which I do not attempting to do so, could shatter the stones themselves. The backlash would kill me and accomplish nothing." "Then I'll make you fix it," Saitama said simply. He moved, closing the distance between them. In space, his fist pulled back for a punch. Thanos activated the Time Stone in desperation, not to reverse Saitama's movement, but to accelerate his own time, to give himself subjective hours to think, while objective seconds passed. In that stretched time, Thanos' tactical mind ran through every scenario, every possibility, every potential application of the stone's remaining power. He analyzed Saitama's every movement, looking for patterns, for weaknesses, for anything that could be exploited, and found nothing. Saitama wasn't faster than light, wasn't stronger than infinite, didn't have any clearly definable power level that Thanos could measure and exceed. He simply existed as something that couldn't be stopped by conventional means, or unconventional means, or apparently any means at all. Thanos' mind, honed by centuries of strategic thinking, arrived at an uncomfortable conclusion: he couldn't win this fight. Not directly, not through force or manipulation or cosmic power. But perhaps he didn't need to win directly. Time resumed its normal flow, and Saitama's fist continued toward Thanos' face. Thanos didn't dodge, didn't teleport, didn't try to reverse time or alter reality, or any of the 100 other techniques he'd used so far. He lowered the gauntlet and spoke. "If you strike me with full force, you'll kill me. And if I die, everyone who died in the snap remains dead. Forever." Saitama's fist stopped 1 inch from Thanos' face. "You can't heal if you're dead," Saitama said. "Precisely," Thanos confirmed, "and I cannot bring them back. The gauntlet is too damaged. But there might be a way." He was lying. The gauntlet could restore the dead. But Saitama didn't know that. "Give me time. Let me study the stones, find a method that won't destroy them. Let me try to reverse what I've done." "You're lying," Saitama said flatly. "Perhaps," Thanos admitted. "But can you risk being wrong? Can you gamble billions of lives on your assumption that I'm bluffing?" The silence stretched between them. Two beings hanging in the void, the fate of the universe balanced on the edge of a decision. Then Saitama said, "I don't believe you." His fist moved. Thanos activated every stone, simultaneously channeling power that should have killed him. That did kill him, his body burning from the inside as cosmic forces beyond his capacity to withstand tore through his cells. But he held on long enough to complete the technique. Not an attack, a defense. The Reality Stone rewrote the space around him, not to harm Saitama, but to create a pocket dimension, a bubble of altered existence that existed half a step outside of normal space. The Space Stone expanded that bubble, stretching it across light years in a direction that wasn't any of the 3 dimensions normal matter occupied. The Time Stone locked Saitama's position relative to normal space, creating a temporal anchor that kept him from following. The Mind Stone created a psionic barrier, not to harm Saitama, but to prevent him from immediately perceiving where Thanos had gone. The Power Stone amplified all of it, pouring energy into the defense until it became something that even the Infinity Stone struggled to maintain. The Soul Stone, last and most subtle, severed Thanos' connection to normal space-time entirely for 3 seconds, making him not invisible, but literally absent from the universe. It cost Thanos everything. The gauntlet shattered not metaphorically, but literally, the golden metal cracking and falling away in pieces. 5 of the 6 Infinity Stones went dark, their power depleted beyond recovery in the short term. Only the Space Stone retained a flicker of light, barely enough power for one final teleportation. Thanos used it, vanishing from Earth's orbit, leaving Saitama hanging in space, his fist striking nothing but vacuum. By the time Saitama's senses reoriented and found Thanos' trail, the Mad Titan was already beyond reach, somewhere in deep space, hiding in the vast emptiness between galaxies, where even someone with Saitama's capabilities would take time to search. Saitama floated in orbit for 10 seconds, his fist still extended, his expression unreadable. Then he turned and looked down at Earth, at the planet where half of all people had just been erased, where survivors were trying to process loss beyond comprehension. He could chase Thanos, could search the universe mile by mile until he found where the Mad Titan was hiding. But that could take days, weeks, months if Thanos kept running, kept using the last dregs of the Space Stone's power to stay ahead. And while Saitama searched, the people on Earth would suffer, would struggle with the aftermath of the snap, would need help that only he could provide by virtue of being strong enough to move mountains and fast enough to rescue thousands. Saitama made a decision. He turned away from the stars and began falling back toward Earth, his trajectory controlled and measured, aimed at the ruins of Manhattan where the heroes had gathered. He'd find Thanos eventually. The Mad Titan couldn't hide forever. And when Saitama found him, there would be no more running, no more clever tactics, no more speeches about balance and necessity. There would just be a fight. And Saitama would win that fight, because that was what he did. But first, he had people to help, because that was also what he did. He was a hero after all, even if he'd only started doing it for fun. Thanos materialized in a cave on Titan, the dead world that had once been his home. The gauntlet was ruined, barely clinging to his arm, 5 stones dark, and 1 flickering with barely sustainable light. His body was broken in ways that would take weeks to heal, even with his alien physiology. The stone's power had burned through him, leaving damage at the cellular level that resembled radiation poisoning, but worse. He had escaped, had survived an encounter with a being that should have killed him, had preserved the snap, ensured that the balance would remain. But he'd lost. Not in the immediate sense he still lived, the snap remained in effect, half the universe stayed saved. But Thanos understood tactics, understood the long game. And in the long game, Saitama would find him, would hunt him down with the patient inevitability of entropy itself. And next time, there would be no stones to facilitate escape, no cosmic power to hide behind. Just Thanos' own strength against something that couldn't be hurt, couldn't be stopped, couldn't be defeated by anything he'd ever encountered. He sat in the cave that had sheltered him as a child, before his world had fallen, before he'd begun his crusade, to prevent that fate from befalling all of existence. He looked at the broken gauntlet, at the darkened stones, at the proof that even cosmic power had limits. And for the first time in his long life, Thanos felt something he'd thought he'd forgotten how to feel. Fear. Back on Earth, Saitama landed in the ruins of Manhattan, where Tony Stark was still trying to coordinate rescue efforts with armor that was mostly non-functional and a mind that kept replaying Peter Parker's dissolution on infinite loop. Saitama walked over to where Steve Rogers was helping move debris off of trapped civilians, his cracked shield set aside, his super soldier strength bent to the simple task of saving lives. "I lost him," Saitama said. Steve looked up, his face streaked with dust and sweat and dried tears. "But he's alive," Steve said. It wasn't a question. "Yes. Can you find him again?" Saitama nodded. "Eventually. Then we'll figure out how to bring everyone back, Steve said with a stubborn certainty that had defined his entire life. We'll find a way. We always do. Saitama looked at the captain, at this man who'd lost his oldest friend, who'd watched half the world die, and who was still choosing hope over despair. I'm sorry I didn't stop him, Saitama said quietly. Steve paused in his work, looked at Saitama for a long moment, then shook his head. You tried. You survived something that killed half the universe. And you're here helping when you could have kept chasing him. That's enough. It's not enough, Saitama said. Half of everyone is still dead. Then we'll make it enough, Steve said. Together. Because that's what heroes do. Saitama looked around at the ruined city, at the survivors working to save whoever they could, at the evidence of loss so vast it couldn't be fully comprehended. And he nodded. Okay, he said. Together. Because even if he'd started being a hero for fun, this had stopped being funny a long time ago. This was serious now. And when Saitama got serious, nothing, not gods, not aliens, not the fundamental forces of reality itself, would stand in his way. Thanos had won the battle. But the war was far from over. 3 days had passed since the snap. Manhattan looked like a war zone, which was accurate because it had been one. The Avengers compound upstate had become the de facto center of operations for Earth's surviving defenders. A place where heroes, soldiers, and government officials tried to coordinate a response to loss so vast it broke conventional systems of governance and aid. Half of all emergency responders were gone. Half of all doctors, engineers, pilots, farmers. The global infrastructure was collapsing in slow motion, held together by the desperate efforts of those who remained, and the grim understanding that letting it fail meant even more death. Saitama had spent those 3 days helping. He'd pulled survivors from collapsed buildings in Mumbai, had stopped a nuclear reactor from melting down in France after half the safety crew dissolved mid-shift, had caught planes that were falling from the sky when their pilots ceased to exist, had moved with the kind of speed and tirelessness that only someone who didn't need sleep or rest could maintain. Tony Stark watched him through the compound's windows, this being in yellow, who'd appeared from nowhere, and spent 72 hours saving lives with the same methodical efficiency someone might use to clean a house. No drama, no speeches, just work. He hasn't stopped, Bruce Banner said, walking up beside Tony. Bruce had survived the snap unlike the Hulk, and was still processing the fact that the rage-fueled giant was simply gone, scattered to dust, while Bruce's consciousness remained. Doesn't eat, doesn't sleep, just goes wherever Jarvis identifies a crisis and fixes it. Jarvis counted, Tony said quietly. 73,412 people saved in 3 days. That we know of. There are probably more we haven't documented. One man doing the work of an entire emergency response system, Bruce said. And he's still not fast enough. We lost 100 million in the chaos after the snap. Infrastructure collapse accident systems failing. 100 million deaths, beyond what Thanos directly caused. And he knows, Tony said. You can see it in his face. That same expression. Not guilt exactly. Just awareness. He knows he can't save everyone, but that doesn't stop him from trying to save who he can. Steve Rogers entered the observation room, his uniform replaced with simple tactical gear, his shield still cracked from where Thanos had broken it. He looked older than he had 4 days ago, the weight of loss visible in the lines around his eyes. We need to talk about the plan, Steve said without preamble. We have a partial lock on Thanos' location, some kind of energy signature in deep space that might be the space stone's residual radiation. If we can confirm it, We can send a team. To do what? Tony asked, his voice flat. We threw everything at him, Steve. Everything. And the only reason any of us are alive is because that guy in yellow is apparently immune to cosmic power, and even he couldn't stop the snap. Then we find another way, Steve said with a stubborn determination that was simultaneously his greatest strength and most infuriating trait. We bring them back. Peter, Bucky, everyone. There has to be a way. The gauntlet is shattered, Bruce said gently. I've been analyzing the data from Tony's armor during the fight. The stones went dark. Even if we found Thanos, even if we somehow beat him, we can't use the stones to reverse the snap. Then we find the stones, Steve insisted. Rebuild the gauntlet. Do it ourselves. Steve, Tony said, turning to face him. Let's say we do that. Let's say we somehow gather the stones. Somehow build a gauntlet that can channel their power, somehow figure out how to use them. Who snaps their fingers? Because in case you missed it, using the stones nearly killed Thanos, and he's a Titan who'd been preparing for that moment his entire life. It would kill any human instantly. Then we find someone it won't kill, Steve said. Or we accept the cost. But we don't give up. We don't let half the universe stay dead because it's hard. Through the window, Saitama landed in the compound's courtyard, returning from whatever crisis he'd been addressing in the past hour. His yellow suit was dusty, but intact, his expression unchanged, that same mild look that suggested nothing particularly interesting had happened. What about him? Bruce asked. The stones can't affect him. Maybe he could use them. Maybe he could snap everyone back without dying. Maybe, Tony said. Or maybe the stones just wouldn't work for him at all. We don't know the rules for how he interacts with cosmic power. He's immune to it targeting him, but can he channel it? Can he direct it? He paused. And that's assuming we can even find the stones which are scattered across the universe, probably hidden or destroyed or claimed by other powers who saw what Thanos did and want that force for themselves. So we ask him, Steve said simply. We explain the situation and ask if he'll help. He's been helping, Bruce pointed out. For 3 days straight, without rest, saving people he doesn't know on a planet he ended up on by accident. Then he'll understand why we need to try, Steve said. Saitama entered the compound through the main doors, his footsteps barely audible despite his size. He walked into the observation room where the three heroes were discussing strategy, his hands in his pockets, his expression politely neutral. You should rest, Steve said to him. You've been working nonstop. I'm fine, Saitama said. What did you want to talk about? Steve exchanged glances with Tony and Bruce, then stepped forward. We're planning to go after Thanos. Find him, stop him permanently, and figure out a way to bring everyone back. We could use your help. Saitama looked at Steve for a long moment, his expression unreadable. I was planning to do that anyway, he said. But I wanted to help here first. People are still dying from what happened. And they'll keep dying. Tony said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. The systems are too damaged. We've lost too many people. Even with you working miracles, we can't stop the collapse. Not permanently. Then what's the point? Saitama asked, and there was no challenge in his voice, just genuine curiosity. If I can't stop it, why try? Because every life you save matters, Steve said immediately. Every person who survives because you were there, because you tried, they matter. We don't stop fighting just because we can't win completely. We fight because it's the right thing to do. Saitama looked at Captain America, at this man who'd been fighting that fight for 70 years, who'd lost everything and everyone multiple times, and still chose hope. Okay, Saitama said. I'll help hunt Thanos, but there's a problem. Just one? Tony muttered. I need to go home, Saitama said. Back to my universe. I have a life there, grocery shopping, rent, normal things. The three heroes stared at him. You're worried about grocery shopping, Tony said slowly, while half the universe is dead. It's Wednesday, Saitama said, as if this explained everything. There's a sale. Bruce laughed, and it was slightly hysterical, the sound of someone processing cosmic horror through absurdity. He's worried about missing a sale, while we're planning to hunt down a cosmic tyrant and reverse universal genocide. He's worried about groceries. You don't understand, Saitama said seriously. The sale is really good. Gutty Steve pinched the bridge of his nose, feeling a headache building that had nothing to do with physical injury. All right, he said finally. Let's table the grocery discussion. How do we get you home? The dimensional rupture you came through is gone. Doctor Strange is gone. Wong is trying to figure out if there's a way to open portals between realities, but it's not his specialty. I'll find a way, Saitama said with the casual confidence of someone who'd solved impossible problems through pure stubbornness before. But first, Thanos. Where is he? Tony pulled up a holographic display showing a sector of deep space far beyond Earth's solar system. Best guess based on residual energy signatures and the trajectory of his escape. He's somewhere in this region. It's vast. We're talking hundreds of cubic light years. It would take conventional spacecraft decades to search it. How long will it take me? Saitama asked. Tony did some quick calculations, his mind still working despite the exhaustion and trauma. If you can survive hard vacuum indefinitely, and if you can maintain the speeds we observed during your orbital chase, maybe a week, 2 weeks, that's assuming you can navigate in deep space, which is harder than it sounds, when there are no landmarks. I'll figure it out, Saitama said again. Just like that, Tony said. You'll fly through space, search hundreds of cubic light years, find a being who controls teleportation and can hide anywhere, and then what? You couldn't stop the snap last time. What makes you think you can do better now? Saitama's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. Something cold and final. Last time I tried to stop him. This time I'm going to hit him until he brings everyone back or dies trying, whichever comes first. The casual brutality of that statement, delivered in Saitama's usual flat tone, made all three heroes uncomfortable. We're not executioners, Steve said carefully. We don't kill people, even people like Thanos. He killed half the universe, Saitama said. Half of everyone. And he said he'd do it again if he had to. That he'd keep doing it until the universe was balanced. The way he said the word made it clear what he thought of Thanos' philosophy. I'm not letting him do that. So you'll kill him, Steve said. If that's what it takes to stop him, yes. Steve wanted to argue. Wanted to explain why that was wrong, why heroes didn't cross that line, why killing Thanos would make them no better than him. But he remembered Peter Parker dissolving into dust. Remembered Bucky saying his name one last time before ceasing to exist. Remembered half of everyone dying while he stood there helpless. And he couldn't find the words to argue. Tony saw Steve's internal struggle and stepped in. Here's what we do, he said. Saitama goes after Thanos. We don't have better options, and frankly, he's the only one who can survive in deep space long enough to make the search. Meanwhile, those of us left on Earth try to stabilize things here and research alternatives. Wong is looking into the mystical angle. I'm analyzing the data from the gauntlet, seeing if there's a technological approach. We come at this from every angle. And if Saitama finds Thanos first, Bruce asked. Then we hope he can convince Thanos to reverse the snap, Tony said. Or, failing that? He trailed off, not wanting to finish the sentence. Failing that, I hit him until he changes his mind, Saitama finished for him. That's not how minds work, Bruce said. It'll work, Saitama said with absolute certainty. Steve made a decision, the kind of hard call that leadership required, even when there were no good options. Go, he said to Saitama. Find Thanos. Try to bring him back alive if you can. But if you can't, he paused, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. Do what you have to do to stop him from ever doing this again. Saitama nodded, accepting the mission with the same casual efficiency he'd shown everything else. I'll need supplies, he said. Food, water, something to navigate by. You don't breathe in space, Tony pointed out. Why would you need food and water? I still get hungry, Saitama said, as if this was obvious. Tony stared at him for 3 seconds, then laughed, and it was slightly unhinged. Right. Of course, the man who survives hard vacuum still needs to eat. Why not? Why the hell not? He turned to Bruce. Put together a care package, whatever he thinks he'll need. We'll figure out how to attach it to him for the trip. One more thing, Saitama said. After I find Thanos and fix this, after everyone comes back, I need help getting home. We'll figure it out, Steve promised. You have my word. You help us save the universe. We'll help you get back to yours. Saitama considered this, then nodded. Okay. When do I leave? How soon can you be ready? Tony asked. Saitama looked down at himself, at his yellow suit and red gloves and white cape, then back at Tony. I'm ready now. 2 hours later, Saitama stood in the compound's launch area, a small pack strapped to his back, containing food, water, and a beacon that would let him communicate with Earth across vast distances. Tony had insisted on the beacon, had spent an hour explaining how interstellar communication worked and why Saitama needed to check in regularly so they knew he was alive. Saitama had nodded along politely, understanding maybe 30% of the explanation, and agreed to check in daily. The remaining heroes had gathered to see him off. Not many half were gone, and most of the survivors were scattered across the globe, trying to hold civilization together. But Steve was there, and Tony and Bruce. Wong stood nearby, his expression thoughtful as he observed this being who existed outside the frameworks of magic and cosmic law. Thank you, Steve said, extending his hand. For everything you've done. For everything you're about to do. Saitama shook the offered hand, his grip normal and unremarkable. It's fine, he said. I'm a hero. This is what I do. Just a hero for fun, right? Tony asked. And there was something in his tone, not quite mockery, not quite respect, something between them. Started that way, Saitama admitted. It's gotten more serious lately. Happens to the best of us, Tony said. You go out thinking you'll have an adventure, save some people feel good about yourself. Then reality hits, and suddenly it's not about fun anymore. It's about responsibility. About doing what's right, even when it costs everything. Yeah, Saitama said quietly. I'm starting to understand that. Wong stepped forward, his hands moving in complex patterns, mystical energy gathering around them. I can't send you home yet, Wong said. The dimensional barriers are too complex, and I lack the knowledge Dr. Strange had. But I can give you this. He pressed his hands against Saitama's chest, and a mark appeared on the yellow suit, a symbol that glowed faintly with golden light. It's an anchor, Wong explained. Tied to this reality. No matter how far you travel, no matter what happens, you'll always be able to feel the direction back to Earth. It's not perfect, but it should help you navigate in deep space. Thanks, Saitama said, looking down at the glowing mark with interest. And this, Wong added, his voice dropping to something more serious. When you confront Thanos again, remember that the Infinity Stones are only as powerful as their user. Thanos wielded them with absolute certainty, with complete conviction in his cause. That conviction gave him strength. What's your point? Saitama asked. My point is that you are also certain that what he did was wrong, certain that you'll stop him. That certainty is a power in itself. Don't let his philosophy, his arguments, his justifications make you doubt. You know what's right. Saitama nodded slowly, processing this. Then he crouched, preparing to jump the concrete beneath his feet, already cracking from the gathering force. One last thing, Bruce said quickly. If you do find a way to reverse the snap, if you get the gauntlet working, or find some other method, I'll bring everyone back, Saitama interrupted. All of them. That's the plan. It'll probably kill you, Bruce said bluntly. The energy required to affect the entire universe to reverse something as fundamental as what Thanos did. Even you might not survive channeling that much power. Probably, Saitama agreed. And you're going to try anyway, Bruce said. Of course, Saitama said, as if this was the most obvious thing in the world. They're dead because someone decided they shouldn't exist. That's not okay. If I can bring them back, I will. Even if it's hard. Steve smiled, and it was sad and proud at the same time. That's what makes you a hero, he said. Not the strength, not the immunity to cosmic power, the choice to help even when it costs you everything. I'm just doing what seems right, Saitama said. Then he leaped. The launch pad shattered beneath him, concrete and steel, vaporizing from the force of his departure. He shot into the sky, accelerating past the speed of sound, before he'd crossed 100 feet, leaving a sonic boom and a crater in his wake. The heroes watched as his yellow form became a distant speck, then vanished entirely as he left Earth's atmosphere and began the long journey into deep space. Think he'll make it? Bruce asked quietly. He survived everything Thanos threw at him, Tony said. If anyone can hunt down a cosmic tyrant in the vast emptiness of space, it's that guy. And if he can't, Bruce pressed. Tony was quiet for a long moment, looking up at the sky where Saitama had disappeared. Then we're all screwed, he said finally, because we just sent our only hope into space with nothing but a lunchbox and directions that amount to that way somewhere. He'll manage, Steve said with the certainty of someone who'd learned to recognize heroism in its purest form. He's stronger than Thanos, faster, more durable, and now he's motivated. That's a dangerous combination. For Thanos, Wong added quietly. For Thanos. Steve agreed. They stood there for several minutes, looking up at the sky, each processing what had just happened and what it meant for the future. Somewhere out in the vast darkness of space, a being in yellow was hunting the most dangerous creature in the universe. And on Earth, the survivors were holding their breath, hoping that someone who'd started being a hero for fun could save them all. Saitama traveled through space with the same patient determination he brought to everything else. It was quiet out here, dark, empty in a way that Earth's cities and crowds never were. Just him and the stars and the vast distances between them. He followed the beacon Wong had given him in reverse, letting it point him away from Earth rather than toward it, moving in the general direction Tony's calculations had suggested. He didn't know if he'd find Thanos this way. didn't have a detailed plan for what he'd do when he did. But that was fine. He'd figure it out. That was what he always did. Somewhere ahead in the darkness between stars, a mad titan was hiding, clutching a broken gauntlet, and the fragments of cosmic power convinced he'd save the universe through genocide. And coming for him was a man who'd decided that wasn't acceptable. Who'd decided with the simple finality that defined his entire existence that half of everyone dying was wrong and needed to be fixed. The universe was vast. The search would be long. The confrontation, when it came, would determine the fate of trillions. But Saitama wasn't worried. He was a hero. And heroes, even ones who started doing it for fun, didn't give up. They just kept going until the job was done. The stars wheeled overhead as Saitama flew on into the dark, a yellow speck against infinite black, carrying with him the hopes of a broken world and the simple, stubborn determination to make things right. No matter what it cost, no matter how long it took, the story would continue. But for now, this chapter was closed. And somewhere in a cave on a dead world, Thanos felt a chill and looked up at the stars, knowing that something relentless was coming for him. Something that wouldn't stop. Something that couldn't be reasoned with or defeated or escaped from. Something that had decided with absolute finality that balance through genocide was unacceptable. The mad titan had won his greatest victory. But the war was far from over. And this time he wasn't sure he would survive it.